the quantum measurement problem. We begin our descent at the very foundation of the physical world, in the strange and counterintuitive realm of quantum mechanics. Here, particles exist not as definite points, but as waves of probability, existing in multiple states at once, a condition known as superposition. An electron isn't here or there, it exists as a cloud of possibilities until something happens. That something is measurement or observation. The moment we attempt to measure a quantum system's property, like its position or spin, its wave function mysteriously collapses, and the particle snaps into a single, definite state. This transition from a ghostly realm of potentiality to concrete actuality upon measurement is the heart of the quantum measurement problem, one of the most profound and deeply unsettling paradoxes in all of science. It raises the mind-bothering question: does the act of observation itself somehow create the reality we perceive? Is the universe fundamentally indeterminate, a haze of probabilities until a conscious, or perhaps merely interacting, observer forces it to choose a state? Does reality, at its most fundamental level, require an audience to become definite? This radically questions our existence as passive observers in a pre-existing world, suggesting a far more participatory and deeply mysterious role for observation itself, inviting contemplation as you fall asleep. Let's try to grasp the sheer strangeness. Before measurement, a quantum particle, according to the standard mathematical description, the Schrödinger equation, evolves deterministically as a wave of possibilities. It is simultaneously spinning up and spinning down, or located in multiple places at once. This isn't just a matter of us not knowing its state. The theory suggests its state is genuinely indefinite. But the instant we perform a measurement, hitting it with a photon, passing it through a detector, this smooth, probabilistic wave function undergoes a sudden, discontinuous collapse. The superposition vanishes and a single, random outcome manifests. The electron is now spinning up, or it is now located right here. But what constitutes a measurement? Why does measurement cause this collapse? And how does the system choose which specific outcome to actualize from the range of possibilities? This is the core mystery. The implications are staggering. If measurement causes collapse, does it require a conscious observer? This interpretation, sometimes associated with figures like Eugene Wigner, suggests that consciousness itself plays a unique role in collapsing the quantum wave function, literally bringing definite reality into being through the act of looking. This leads to a deeply subjective, almost solipsistic view, where the physical state of the world depends on the presence of minds to observe it. If a quantum event happens in a sealed box with no observer, like Schrödinger's unfortunate cat, simultaneously alive and dead, does it remain in superposition indefinitely until the box is opened? This seems to contradict our experience of a stable, objective reality existing independently of our minds. Most physicists today reject the idea that conscious observers are necessary. They argue that measurement doesn't require a mind, but rather any irreversible interaction with a macroscopic system and environment. The interaction effectively records the quantum state, and this entanglement with the complex environment causes the superposition to rapidly break down through a process called decoherence. Decoherence explains how quantum possibilities effectively leak into the environment, making the system appear to collapse into a single state from the perspective of any macroscopic observer interacting with that environment. While decoherence elegantly explains why we don't observe macroscopic superpositions, like alive/dead cats, many argue it doesn't fully solve the fundamental measurement problem. It explains the loss of interference between possibilities, but doesn't necessarily explain why one specific outcome becomes actualized for a given observer, or what defines the boundary between the quantum system and the macroscopic environment that causes the decoherence. The transition from quantum probability to classical certainty remains conceptually murky. Alternative interpretations of quantum mechanics attempt to resolve the paradox in different ways, each carrying its own burden of strangeness. The many-worlds interpretation proposed by Hugh Everett III denies the collapse altogether. It suggests that every possible outcome of a quantum measurement does occur, each in its own separate, parallel universe. When you measure the electron's spin, the universe branches. In one branch, you measure spin up, and in another, entirely separate branch, a copy of you measures spin down. Observation doesn't create reality by collapse. It reveals which branch of the multiverse you happen to inhabit. This avoids the measurement problem but posits an unobservable, infinitely proliferating multiverse. Other interpretations, like Bohmian mechanics, pilot wave theory, propose hidden variables, underlying properties we can't directly observe, that guide particles along definite trajectories, meaning superposition is just an illusion caused by our ignorance of these hidden variables. Spontaneous collapse theories suggest the wave function collapses randomly on its own, without needing an observer or environment, governed by modified physical laws. Each interpretation offers a different picture of reality, none definitively proven, highlighting the depth of the mystery. The quantum measurement problem forces us to confront the limits of our intuition, shaped by the macroscopic world. It questions the very nature of reality. Is it definite or probabilistic? Is it created or merely revealed by observation? What is the role of the observer, conscious or otherwise, in the unfolding of the cosmos? It suggests that the relationship between mind and matter, observer and observed, might be far more entangled and participatory than classical physics ever imagined. It challenges the notion of an objective world existing entirely independent of the act of measurement or interaction. As you allow your awareness to soften and drift towards sleep, contemplate this fundamental uncertainty at the heart of matter. Particles existing as waves of potential until observed. The act of looking seemingly crystallizing reality. Does your gaze shape the world? Or does the world branch into infinite possibilities with every quantum event? Let the quantum measurement problem dissolve the sharp edges of certainty. Find deep relaxation not in answers, but in the profound paradox itself, that observation and existence might be inextricably linked in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Resting peacefully within the ghostly, probabilistic heart of reality. The Anthropic Principle. Let us now lift our gaze from the quantum realm to the grand scale of the cosmos, contemplating another profound puzzle that questions our existence and its significance within the vast universe, the Anthropic Principle. This principle arises from a startling observation. The fundamental constants and laws of physics that govern our universe appear to be exquisitely fine-tuned to permit the existence of life, particularly complex, conscious life like ours. If certain physical constants, the strength of gravity, the charge of an electron, the ratio of fundamental forces, the initial conditions of the Big Bang, were even slightly different, the universe would be radically altered. Stars might not form, atoms might be unstable, complex chemistry would be impossible, and life as we know it simply could not exist. Why does the universe possess this seemingly improbable life-permitting character? The Anthropic Principle explores this apparent fine-tuning, leading to a paradoxical tension. Is the universe intentionally designed or inherently biased towards producing observers like us? Or are we simply lucky observers living in one of the rare universes, perhaps among many, where the conditions just happen to be right, meaning our observation itself creates a selection bias? This deep question challenges our assumptions about cosmic purpose, chance, and the very nature of scientific explanation, inviting contemplation as you fall asleep. Consider some examples of this apparent fine-tuning. The strength of the electromagnetic force relative to the strong nuclear force is crucial. If it were slightly different, stars couldn't produce carbon, the basis of life. The ratio of the electron's mass to the proton's mass must fall within a narrow range for stable chemistry to occur. The expansion rate of the early universe had to be incredibly precise. Too fast and matter would disperse too quickly for galaxies to form. Too slow and the universe would have recollapsed before life could evolve. The list of such coincidences is long and striking, leading many scientists and philosophers to marvel at the seemingly bio-friendly nature of our cosmos. This observation leads to different interpretations, often framed by variations of the Anthropic Principle. The weak Anthropic Principle, WAP, is generally considered uncontroversial, almost tautological. It simply states that the observed properties of the universe must be compatible with the existence of observers, like us, capable of observing it. In other words, we find ourselves in a universe capable of supporting life because if it weren't capable, we wouldn't be here to observe it. This is a selection bias effect. Our very existence filters the kind of universe we can possibly observe. We shouldn't be surprised to find the conditions right for us, just as a fish shouldn't be surprised to find itself in water. While true, the WAP doesn't explain why the universe has these life-permitting properties in the first place. It merely notes the consistency between the universe's properties and our presence. The strong Anthropic Principle, SAP, makes a much bolder, more controversial claim. It suggests that the universe must have properties that allow life to develop within it at some stage in its history. This implies a deeper teleological aspect, as if the universe is somehow compelled or designed to eventually produce observers. Interpretations of the SAP vary wildly. Some see it as evidence for a divine creator who fine-tuned the constants for life. Others propose more exotic physics, suggesting perhaps a cosmic imperative towards complexity and consciousness. Still others view the SAP not as a scientific explanation but as a philosophical statement about the necessary relationship between observer and observed cosmos. The SAP faces criticism for being potentially unfalsifiable and bordering on metaphysics rather than empirical science. A related concept, often invoked to explain the fine-tuning without resorting to design or teleology, is the multiverse hypothesis. If our universe is just one among a vast, perhaps infinite ensemble of universes, a multiverse, each with potentially different physical constants and laws, then the weak anthropic principle becomes much more powerful. In a multiverse, universes with all sorts of properties would exist. Most would be sterile and lifeless because their constants are wrong. However, purely by chance, some universes would happen to have the lucky combination of constants required for life to emerge. Naturally, observers like us would only find ourselves existing within one of these rare life-permitting universes. The fine-tuning is then explained not by design or necessity, but by observer selection within a vast landscape of possibilities. We aren't special because the universe was made for us. We're simply living in one of the universes where living is possible. While the multiverse resolves the fine-tuning problem elegantly for many physicists, the existence of other universes is, at present, empirically untestable, making it a speculative, though mathematically plausible, hypothesis. The anthropic principle, in its various forms, presents a profound mind duck. It forces us to confront the seemingly improbable nature of our own existence. Are we the result of incredible cosmic luck within a multiverse? Are we the intended outcome of a fine-tuned design? Or is our perception of fine-tuning merely a limitation of our perspective as observers who could only exist in such a universe? It challenges the Copernican principle, the idea that humanity does not occupy a privileged position in the cosmos. The anthropic principle suggests that, merely by being observers, we do occupy a privileged position, at least in terms of the physical conditions required for our existence. This paradox leaves us suspended between chance and necessity, between scientific explanation and philosophical or even theological speculation. It highlights the limits of our ability to explain the ultimate why of the universe's fundamental properties. We can describe the constants, but explaining why they have the specific values they do remains a frontier question. As you continue to fall asleep, let your mind drift across the cosmic landscape. Ponder the delicate balance of forces and constants that allow stars to shine, planets to form, and life to emerge. Is this intricate harmony a cosmic accident, a statistical inevitability in a multiverse, or a sign of deeper purpose? The anthropic principle offers no easy answers, only a profound sense of wonder and perhaps humility. Recognize yourself as an observer within this specific universe, a product of its laws, capable of contemplating its mysteries. Find deep relaxation in accepting this cosmic context, whether tailored or accidental, resting peacefully within the grand, finely balanced, and ultimately enigmatic tapestry of existence. The black hole information paradox. Let us now journey to the very edge of known physics, to the enigmatic and terrifying objects known as black holes, where gravity becomes infinitely strong and the familiar laws of nature seem to break down. Here we encounter one of the most profound and challenging puzzles in modern theoretical physics, a paradox that pits Einstein's theory of general relativity against the principles of quantum mechanics, the black hole information paradox. It revolves around a seemingly simple question with universe-altering implications. What happens to the information about objects that fall into a black hole? According to quantum mechanics, information like energy cannot be truly destroyed, it must be conserved in some form. Yet, according to Stephen Hawking's calculations based on general relativity and quantum effects near the event horizon, black holes eventually evaporate, radiating away energy, Hawking radiation, that seems completely random, carrying no trace of the specific details, the information about what fell in. If the black hole evaporates completely, where does the information go? Is it truly lost forever, violating a fundamental principle of quantum physics? Or does it escape somehow, challenging our understanding of black holes and perhaps even space-time itself? These questions the very fabric of reality, suggesting our most fundamental theories are incomplete and forcing us to reconsider the fate of anything that crosses the ultimate cosmic boundary, inviting deep contemplation as you fall asleep. To grasp the paradox, we need to understand the key players. General relativity describes gravity as the curvature of spacetime caused by mass and energy. Black holes are regions where gravity is so intense that spacetime is warped infinitely at the center, the singularity, and nothing, not even light, can escape once it crosses a boundary called the event horizon. Anything falling in seems lost to the outside universe forever, its individual characteristics swallowed by the black hole's overwhelming gravity, leaving behind only mass, charge, and angular momentum, the no-hair theorem. Quantum mechanics, on the other hand, governs the realm of particles and energy. A core principle is unitarity, which essentially means that information is always conserved. The state of a system at one time determines its state at any other time. Processes are reversible, and information about the initial state is never truly lost, merely scrambled or transformed. If you know the complete quantum state of a system now, you can, in principle, calculate its exact state in the past or future. Destroying information would violate this fundamental tenet. The conflict arises with Hawking radiation. Stephen Hawking famously showed that due to quantum effects near the event horizon, black holes are not entirely black but slowly emit thermal radiation, causing them to shrink and eventually evaporate completely over immense timescales. The problem is that this Hawking radiation appears to be perfectly thermal, meaning it's random and carries no specific information about the unique objects, stars, spaceships, encyclopedias, that fell into the black hole to form it or feed it. If a black hole forms from a collapsing star, radiates thermally, and evaporates into nothing but random heat, what happened to the intricate information detailing the star's composition, structure, and quantum state? It seems to have vanished from the universe, violating quantum unitarity. This is the black hole information paradox. General relativity suggests information is trapped and lost beyond the event horizon, while quantum mechanics insists information must be conserved. Our two most fundamental theories of reality appear to contradict each other at the edge of a black hole. Resolving this paradox is considered one of the most important tasks in theoretical physics, as it likely holds clues to a deeper, unified theory of quantum gravity that can reconcile these two pillars of modern science. Numerous potential solutions have been proposed, each with its own mind-bending implications. Information is truly lost. Perhaps quantum mechanics is incomplete, and information can be destroyed in black holes or other extreme gravitational environments. This would require a radical revision of quantum principles, undermining much of modern physics. Most physicists find this option deeply unpalatable. Information escapes via Hawking radiation. Maybe Hawking's original calculation was incomplete. Perhaps subtle quantum correlations are embedded within the seemingly thermal Hawking radiation, carrying the information out as the black hole evaporates. This would preserve unitarity but requires a mechanism for encoding information in these correlations that is not yet fully understood. The firewall paradox presents challenges to this idea, suggesting that escaping information might require a destructive barrier of high energy at the event horizon. Information is stored in remnants. Perhaps the black hole doesn't evaporate completely, leaving behind a tiny, stable remnant containing all the lost information. This avoids information loss but posits the existence of exotic, unobserved objects with potentially infinite information density. Information is stored in a parallel universe or elsewhere. Some theories suggest the information might escape into another dimension or a baby universe created inside the black hole, effectively removing it from our observable universe but preserving it globally. The holographic principle. This radical idea, emerging from string theory and quantum gravity research, suggests that the information about a volume of space, like the interior of a black hole, can be fully encoded on its boundary, the event horizon. In this view, the information never truly crosses the horizon into a separate interior. It remains encoded on the surface and can potentially be imprinted onto the outgoing Hawking radiation as the surface shrinks. This suggests reality itself might be like a hologram, with 3D space emerging from information stored on a 2D surface, fundamentally challenging our notions of locality in space. The black hole information paradox remains unsolved, a testament to the deep mystery surrounding quantum gravity and the fundamental nature of information and reality. It forces us to confront the limits of our current theories and contemplate possibilities that radically alter our picture of the cosmos. It questions whether space and time are truly fundamental, whether information is the ultimate bedrock of existence, and what happens at the most extreme edges of physical law. As you allow yourself to sink deeper into relaxation, picture the immense gravity of a black hole, the point of no return. Imagine information, the blueprint of a star, the memory of a civilization, falling in. Does it vanish forever, defying quantum law? Or does it somehow escape, perhaps encoded in faint radiation, or stored on a holographic boundary? Let the paradox resonate, the clash between our best theories of gravity and the quantum world. Find peace not in a solution, but in the profound questions it raises about the ultimate fate of things, the conservation of existence itself, resting calmly within the deep, information-rich, and paradoxical darkness of the cosmic mystery. Gettier Problems. For centuries, philosophers operated with a seemingly robust definition of knowledge, justified true belief, JTB. To know something, this definition holds 3 conditions must be met. 1. You must believe it. 2. It must actually be true. And 3. You must be justified in believing it. You need good reasons or evidence. This tripartite definition seemed intuitive and comprehensive, capturing what we usually mean when we say we know something. Then, in 1963, a short, revolutionary paper by philosopher Edmund Gettier presented simple counterexamples, scenarios now known as Gettier Problems, that demonstrated convincingly that having a justified true belief is not always sufficient for knowledge. You can have a belief that is both true and well justified, yet still fail to truly know it, often because the justification is flawed or disconnected from the truth in a crucial, accidental way. This discovery sent shockwaves through epistemology, the theory of knowledge, revealing a deep flaw in the traditional definition and sparking decades of debate about what else is needed for genuine knowledge. Gettier Problems present a subtle but profound mind-ditching paradox, questioning the very relationship between belief, truth, justification, and the elusive nature of certainty, inviting you to fall asleep pondering the precarious foundations of what you think you know. Let's illustrate with a classic Gettier-style example. Imagine Smith and Jones have applied for the same job. Smith has strong evidence, justification, leading him to believe that Jones will get the job. Perhaps the company president told him so. Smith also happens to know, correctly, that Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Based on this, Smith forms the belief, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Now, let's suppose that, unknown to Smith, the president was mistaken or changed their mind, and it is actually Smith himself who will get the job. And, purely by coincidence, Smith also happens to have 10 coins in his pocket. Consider Smith's belief, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket. Is this belief true? Yes, because Smith is getting the job and he has 10 coins. Is Smith justified in believing it? Yes, he deduced it logically from his justified belief that Jones would get the job and his knowledge that Jones had 10 coins. So, Smith has a justified true belief. But does Smith actually know that the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket? Intuitively, most people would say no. His belief is true only by sheer luck, by coincidence. His justification, though sound based on his evidence about Jones, is ultimately flawed because its connection to the truth of the statement, which relies on Smith having the coins, is accidental. He arrived at a true belief based on faulty reasoning rooted in a false premise, that Jones would get the job. Gettier Problems highlight this crucial disconnect. The justification for the belief must be appropriately linked to why the belief is true. If the justification points one way but the belief happens to be true for entirely different, coincidental reasons, it doesn't seem to count as genuine knowledge. It's like hitting the bullseye with an arrow while aiming at a completely different target. The successful outcome is accidental, not a result of skillful aim, justification properly connected to truth. These counterexamples revealed that the traditional JTB definition of knowledge was incomplete. Something more is needed beyond justified true belief. But what is that missing condition? This question has fueled numerous attempts to refine the definition of knowledge. Some propose adding a no false lemmas condition. The justification must not rely on any false intermediate beliefs. In the example, Smith's justification relied on the false belief that Jones would get the job. Others suggest a defeater condition. There must not be any other overriding truths that, if known, would undermine the justification. Still others focus on the reliability of the belief-forming process. Knowledge requires true belief formed through a reliable cognitive process, like clear perception or sound logical inference. Causal theories suggest knowledge requires the belief to be appropriately causally connected to the fact that makes it true. Each proposed fourth condition aims to rule out Gettier-style cases where justification and truth align merely by luck, but each faces its own philosophical challenges and counterexamples. The persistence of Gettier problems constitutes a deep psychology mystery in the sense that it reveals a fundamental puzzle about our cognitive relationship to the world. Why is our intuition so strong that Smith doesn't know, even though he meets the JTB criteria? It suggests our concept of knowledge implicitly requires a non-accidental connection between justification and truth, a connection that is surprisingly difficult to capture in a precise, exception-proof definition. It questions our confidence in our own justifications. How can we be sure our reasons for believing something are genuinely connected to its truth, and not just accidentally leading us to the right answer for the wrong reasons? This paradox forces us to be more circumspect about claims to knowledge. It highlights the potential fragility of our justifications and the ever-present possibility of luck or coincidence masquerading as understanding. It pushes epistemology towards a more nuanced appreciation of the complexities involved in genuinely knowing something, beyond simply having good reasons for a belief that happens to be true. It suggests that the journey from justified belief to genuine knowledge might involve factors like reliability, causal connection, or the absence of defeaters that are often harder to ascertain than simple truth or justification. As you continue to fall asleep, let the subtle mind paradox of the Gettier problem gently permeate your awareness. Consider a belief you hold confidently. You believe it, it might be true, and you feel you have good reasons. But is the connection between your reasons and the truth robust, or could it be accidental? Like Smith, could you be right for the wrong reasons? Let this question dissolve any rigid certainty about knowledge. Embrace the mystery that lies between believing truly and truly knowing. Find deep relaxation not in definitive proof, but in acknowledging the intricate, sometimes lucky relationship between our minds and the truth, resting peacefully within the subtle, persistent puzzle of justification. Newcomb's paradox. We now venture into a realm where decision theory, free will, and seemingly perfect prediction collide, creating a paradox that deeply questions the nature of rational choice and causality itself. Newcomb's paradox. Imagine you are presented with two boxes, box A and box B, by a highly unusual being. A predictor who has an astonishing track record of accurately predicting human choices, perhaps even being infallible. Box A is transparent and always contains $1,000. Box B is opaque. Its contents depend on the predictor's prior prediction of your choice. The rules are simple. You have two options. 1. Take only box B. 2. Take both box A and box B. Here's the crucial part. The predictor, having analyzed you or possessing near-perfect predictive powers, has already made a prediction yesterday about which choice you will make today. If the predictor predicted you would choose both boxes, they put nothing in box B. If the predictor predicted you would choose only box B, they put $1 million in box B. The predictor has now left. The contents of box B are fixed based on yesterday's prediction, and you must now make your choice. What do? This scenario, devised by physicist William Newcomb and popularized by philosopher Robert Nozick, presents a profound mind paradox because two seemingly compelling lines of reasoning lead to opposite conclusions, forcing you to confront the tension between maximizing expected utility and exercising causal control, especially when faced with seemingly perfect foresight. Which choice is rational when your decision seems already known? Let this paradox gently challenge your assumptions as you fall asleep. Let's analyze the two conflicting arguments. The first line of reasoning appeals to expected utility or dominance. It goes like this. The predictor made their prediction yesterday. The money, either $0 or $1 million, is already in box B or it isn't. Your choice today cannot possibly change what is already inside box B. The past prediction and its consequence are fixed. Now consider your options. If the $1 million is in box B, choosing both boxes yields $1,001,000, while choosing only box B yields $1 million. So, taking both is better in this case. If the $1 million is not in box B because the predictor predicted you'd take both, choosing both boxes yields $1,000 while choosing only box B yields $0. So, taking both is also better in this case. Therefore, regardless of what the predictor predicted and what is currently in box B, choosing both boxes always yields $1,000 more than choosing only box B. This is the dominant strategy. Taking both boxes seems unequivocally rational based on maximizing your gain given the current state of the boxes. This is often called the two-boxer argument. However, a second line of reasoning, focusing on the predictor's established accuracy, leads to the opposite conclusion. This argument emphasizes evidence and predictability. It goes like this. The predictor is known to be incredibly accurate, perhaps nearly infallible. If you choose to take both boxes now, this provides strong evidence that the predictor already predicted you would take both boxes yesterday, and therefore box B is almost certainly empty. Choosing both would likely yield only $1,000. Conversely, if you choose to take only box B now, this provides strong evidence that the predictor predicted you would take only box B yesterday, and therefore box B almost certainly contains the $1 million. Choosing only box B would likely yield $1 million. Looking at the past success rate of the predictor, choosing only box B seems to lead to a much better outcome. People who choose one box tend to walk away rich. People who choose two boxes tend to walk away with only $1,000. Therefore, the rational choice appears to be taking only box B. This is the one-boxer argument. Here lies the paradox. Two compelling principles of rational decision-making: maximizing gain based on the current state, dominance principle, and using evidence of past correlations to guide choices, maximizing expected utility based on evidence, lead to diametrically opposite recommendations. Which principle should prevail? What is the rational choice? The conflict forces us to examine the relationship between prediction, causality, and free will. The crux seems to lie in the nature of the predictor. If the predictor is truly infallible, does your choice today somehow causally influence the predictor's past prediction, creating a backward causation loop, linking to ideas from the bootstrap paradox perhaps? Most interpretations reject backward causation. More plausibly, the predictor has access to information about your deterministic decision-making process or possesses predictive capabilities beyond our current understanding. If your choice is predetermined, challenging free will, then the predictor can know it in advance. Your choice today is merely the playing out of that determined process. In this case, choosing one box is the rational choice if you believe you are the type of person whose predetermined process leads to choosing one box, and thus being rewarded. However, if you believe you have genuine free will, capable of making a choice independent of prior determining factors at the moment of decision, then the two-boxer argument seems stronger. The contents of box B are already fixed. Your present free choice cannot change the past prediction. Therefore, you should take both to maximize your gain based on the unchangeable present state. Yet, this ignores the overwhelming evidence of the predictor's accuracy. Why would acting rationally, according to the dominance principle, consistently lead to a worse outcome? Newcomb's paradox highlights the tension between two modes of rationality: evidential decision theory, choose the action that provides the best evidence for a good outcome, favoring one boxing, and causal decision theory, choose the action that causally produces the best outcome, considering only future effects, favoring two boxing. The paradox is designed precisely to pit these two against each other when dealing with a near-perfect predictor. It questions whether our standard models of rationality are adequate when faced with scenarios involving seemingly flawless prediction or potential challenges to our intuitive understanding of causality and free will. There is no universally agreed-upon solution. Philosophers remain divided between one-boxers and two-boxers, with sophisticated arguments supporting each side. The paradox continues to provoke debate about the nature of choice, prediction, determinism, and rationality itself. It serves as a powerful thought experiment pushing the boundaries of decision theory. As you continue to fall asleep, let the perplexing choice of Newcomb's paradox gently unfold in your mind. The two boxes, the infallible predictor, the fixed past, the present decision. Would you trust the evidence of past predictions and take only box B, hoping for the million? Or would you trust causal logic, knowing the past is fixed, and take both boxes for the guaranteed extra 1,000? Feel the tension between these rationales? Let the paradox dissolve the illusion of simple choices. Recognize the deep mystery surrounding prediction, causality, and your own agency. Find deep relaxation not in solving the puzzle, but in contemplating the profound questions it raises about how we choose and why, resting peacefully within the unsettling, choice-defying enigma. The Repugnant Conclusion. Let us now venture into the challenging landscape of population ethics, where seemingly innocuous principles of morality, when pushed to their logical extremes, can lead to outcomes that strike us as deeply unsettling, even horrifying. We confront the repugnant conclusion, a paradox powerfully articulated by philosopher Derek Parfit, which emerges from certain utilitarian or consequentialist frameworks. Imagine a world A, populated by a certain number of people, say 10 billion, all living wonderfully happy, fulfilling lives. Now, consider World B, which contains twice as many people, 20 billion, but whose average level of happiness is slightly lower than in World A, though still positive and well worth living. Many ethical theories, particularly those focused on maximizing total well-being, would suggest that World B is morally better than World A, because the sheer increase in population, even with slightly lower average happiness, results in a greater sum total of happiness in the universe. Now, imagine iterating this process, creating World C with even more people living lives just barely above the threshold of being worth living than World D, and so on. The paradox arises because this logic seems to imply that for any world filled with incredibly happy people, there must be a better world, World Z, containing a vastly larger population whose lives are only minimally worth living, perhaps filled with muzak and potatoes, as Parfit Drilly suggested, just barely above the point of neutrality where life ceases to be preferable to non-existence. Is this massively populated world of barely worth living lives truly better than a smaller world of ecstatic flourishing? Our intuition screams no, yet deriving this conclusion from seemingly plausible ethical premises proves incredibly difficult. The repugnant conclusion is a profound mind-boggling, forcing us to question our fundamental assumptions about value, population size, and the very goal of ethical action, inviting deep relaxation through the contemplation of seemingly irresolvable moral dilemmas. The argument leading to the repugnant conclusion often starts from seemingly reasonable premises. One common starting point is the principle of beneficence. If other things are equal, it is better if people are better off. Another is the principle of mere addition. Adding a new person whose life is worth living without affecting the well-being of existing people does not make the world worse. Now imagine World A, happy people. We can conceive of adding a group of people whose lives are less happy than those in A, but still well worth living, creating World A+. According to mere addition, A+ is not worse than A. Now, imagine World B, where the total happiness is greater than A+, but the happiness is distributed more evenly, resulting in everyone being slightly less happy than the original inhabitants of A, but still happier than the added group in A+. Utilitarian logic might suggest B is better than A+, greater total happiness. By repeating this process, adding lives barely worth living, then redistributing to slightly lower the average but increase the total, we can logically slide down a slope towards the vast, teeming World Z, where everyone's life is only infinitesimally valuable, yet the sheer number of lives results in a potentially enormous total value, exceeding that of the original happy World A. This conclusion feels deeply repugnant to our moral intuitions. We intuitively value the quality of life, not just the sheer quantity of minimally positive existence. A world overflowing with lives barely worth enduring seems like a dystopia, not an ethical ideal. It clashes with our sense that depth, richness, complexity, and high levels of well-being are intrinsically valuable. Yet, rejecting the conclusion requires challenging one or more of the seemingly plausible premises or logical steps that lead to it. Philosophers have struggled mightily to escape the repugnant conclusion without sacrificing core ethical intuitions. One approach is to reject total utilitarianism in favor of average utilitarianism, which aims to maximize the average level of well-being per person, rather than the total sum. Average utilitarianism neatly avoids the repugnant conclusion, as World A with its high average happiness would always be preferable to the vast World Z with its minuscule average happiness. However, average utilitarianism leads to its own paradoxical and arguably equally repugnant implications. For instance, it implies that adding a new person whose life is incredibly happy but slightly below the current high average would actually make the world worse, simply because it lowers the average. It could even suggest that eliminating individuals whose happiness is below average might be morally good because it raises the average, conclusions most find morally unacceptable. Another approach involves questioning the mere addition principle. Perhaps adding lives that are barely worth living, even if they don't directly harm existing people, can make the world worse in some sense, perhaps by reducing average quality or straining resources in the long run. However, pinpointing why adding a worthwhile life would be intrinsically bad is difficult. Other attempts involve introducing critical levels or thresholds of well-being. Perhaps only lives above a certain positive threshold contribute positively to the value of the world, or perhaps there are diminishing returns to adding more lives, especially those near the baseline. Some theories incorporate perfectionist values, arguing that higher forms of achievement, creativity, and flourishing have disproportionately greater value than mere minimal positive experience, thus resisting the slide towards World Z. Others explore variable value views, where the value of adding a life depends on the size and quality of the existing population. Each of these proposed solutions introduces its own complexities and potential counterintuitions, demonstrating the deep difficulty of constructing a population ethic that aligns perfectly with all our moral judgments. The repugnant conclusion is not just an abstract philosophical game. It has profound implications for real-world issues concerning future generations, resource allocation, environmental policy, and reproductive ethics. How should we weigh the well-being of potential future people against the well-being of those currently alive? Is there a moral obligation to bring more happy people into existence? How do we value quantity versus quality of life on a global scale? The paradox forces us to confront the uncomfortable trade-offs inherent in these deepest questions. It questions our very understanding of what makes an existence valuable. Is a single life of profound joy and accomplishment worth more than a million lives of minimal contentment? Our intuition might say yes, but justifying this preference within a consistent ethical framework proves surprisingly challenging. This mindfuck paradox reveals the potential fragility or incompleteness of our ethical theories when confronted with the complexities of population size and varying quality of life. It suggests that our moral intuitions, honed perhaps for smaller-scale interactions, may break down when applied to vast, impersonal calculations about future worlds. It leaves us in a state of profound uncertainty about how to ethically evaluate the grand sweep of potential human futures. As you continue to fall asleep, let the unsettling image of World Z gently dissolve. A world teeming with lives barely worth living, yet deemed better by a certain cold logic. Feel the intuitive resistance, the value you place on richness, depth, and flourishing. Acknowledge the deep paradox, the conflict between maximizing quantity and preserving quality. Let go of the need for a simple formula for ethical value. Find deep relaxation in recognizing the profound complexity of moral calculation when applied to existence itself. Appreciate the inherent value you find in a life well lived, even if defining it universally remains one of philosophy's most challenging and unanswered questions. Resting peacefully within the intricate, troubling, yet vital landscape of ethical contemplation. The paradox of hedonism. Let us now explore a paradox that strikes at the heart of one of life's most common pursuits, the search for happiness. We desire it, we strive for it, we often make choices explicitly aimed at achieving it. Yet, philosophical wisdom and psychological observation suggest a counterintuitive truth. The more directly and intensely we pursue happiness or pleasure for its own sake, the more elusive it often becomes. This is the paradox of hedonism, also sometimes called the pleasure paradox. It posits that happiness and pleasure are often best attained indirectly, as byproducts of engaging in meaningful activities, pursuing other goals, or losing oneself in the moment, rather than by making happiness itself the primary target of our striving. Why does the direct hunt for joy so often lead to frustration or emptiness? This mindfuck paradox questions the very nature of well-being and the effectiveness of our conscious strategies to achieve it, inviting deep relaxation through understanding the subtle, often indirect pathways to genuine contentment as you fall asleep. The paradox arises from the very nature of happiness and pleasure as subjective states. Unlike concrete external goals, like building a house or earning a degree, happiness is an internal, often emergent feeling. Trying too hard to force this feeling can be counterproductive. One key reason is self-consciousness. When we make happiness our explicit goal, we tend to constantly monitor our internal state. Am I happy now? Is this enough happiness? Am I happier than I was before? Could I be happier doing something else? This intense self-monitoring and evaluation creates psychological distance from the experience itself. Instead of simply being in the moment and allowing positive feelings to arise naturally, we become detached observers of our own emotional state, often tinged with anxiety about whether we are succeeding in our quest for happiness. This very act of scrutiny can diminish or even extinguish the spontaneous joy we seek. Imagine trying to force yourself to find a joke funny by analyzing its structure. The humor vanishes under the weight of conscious effort. Similarly, demanding happiness from an experience often prevents it from unfolding. Another crucial factor is hedonic adaptation, also known as the hedonic treadmill. Our emotional systems are designed to react to changes in circumstances, but we tend to adapt relatively quickly to new sources of pleasure. The initial thrill of a new car, a raise, or a luxurious vacation fades over time as it becomes the new normal. If our strategy for happiness relies solely on chasing the next pleasure hit, we find ourselves needing increasingly intense or novel stimuli to achieve the same level of satisfaction. This constant pursuit of fleeting pleasures, driven by the direct goal of feeling good, can lead to a cycle of temporary highs followed by adaptation and renewed craving, ultimately resulting in dissatisfaction rather than lasting contentment. The direct pursuit focuses on acquiring external sources of pleasure, which are subject to diminishing returns, rather than cultivating internal states or meaningful engagement. Furthermore, the paradox of hedonism suggests that genuine, deep happiness often arises from activities that are not primarily focused on achieving pleasure. Consider activities that involve meaning, purpose, or flow, a concept from psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Engaging deeply in a challenging skill, pursuing a creative passion, contributing to a cause larger than oneself, or fostering deep connections with others, these activities often involve effort, concentration, and sometimes even struggle or sacrifice. The primary motivation is not immediate pleasure, but the intrinsic value of the activity itself, the sense of purpose, or the connection established. Yet, paradoxically, it is often within these states of focused engagement, contribution, or connection that people report their most profound feelings of fulfillment, satisfaction, and yes, happiness. Happiness emerges as a byproduct of being absorbed in something meaningful, rather than the goal itself. As philosopher John Stuart Mill observed, ask yourself whether you are happy and you cease to be so. Happiness is often found when we forget to look for it directly. This distinction is crucial. Hedonism, as a philosophy, can refer simply to the idea that pleasure is the ultimate good, ethical hedonism, or that humans are psychologically motivated only by seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, psychological hedonism. The paradox primarily challenges the effectiveness of directly pursuing pleasure as the sole or primary strategy for achieving well-being. It suggests that even if pleasure is the ultimate good, the best way to attain it might be indirectly. It highlights a potential flaw in psychological hedonism by suggesting our motivations are more complex, often geared towards goals like meaning or connection, from which happiness then ensues. This mind-blind paradox forces us to question our deeply ingrained cultural narratives about the pursuit of happiness. Modern society often bombards us with messages implying happiness is a commodity to be acquired, a state to be achieved through consumption, success, or constant self-optimization. The paradox of hedonism suggests this direct, often frantic, pursuit might be fundamentally misguided, leading to anxiety and disappointment rather than genuine well-being. It questions whether our very focus on happiness as an explicit goal might be the primary obstacle to experiencing it. How can we navigate this paradox and cultivate happiness more effectively? The key lies in shifting focus. Instead of making being happy the goal, focus on engaging in activities that bring meaning, purpose, connection, growth, or absorption. Identify your values and pursue goals aligned with them. Cultivate strong social relationships, investing time and empathy in connecting with others. Seek out activities that challenge you and allow you to enter states of flow, where you lose track of time and self-consciousness. Practice gratitude and savoring, consciously appreciating the positive aspects of your current experience rather than constantly chasing the next high. Engage in acts of kindness or contribution, which often generate profound feelings of satisfaction. Mindfulness practices can also help by fostering present-moment awareness, reducing the self-conscious monitoring that hinders spontaneous joy. Essentially, the paradox of hedonism encourages us to build a life rich in meaningful engagement, trusting that happiness will arise more naturally as a consequence, rather than pursuing it like a butterfly that flies away the moment you try to grasp it. As you allow yourself to fall asleep, let go of any striving for a particular feeling. Release the pressure to be happy. Instead, gently bring to mind activities, connections, or purposes that feel intrinsically valuable to you. Contemplate the idea that fulfillment often comes as a quiet companion to meaningful engagement, not as a prize won through direct pursuit. Find deep relaxation in this indirect path, trusting that by focusing on living a life aligned with value and purpose, moments of genuine contentment and joy will naturally find their way to you, resting peacefully, not in the hunt for happiness, but in the quiet richness of meaningful being. Buridan's ass. Imagine a donkey, perfectly rational, standing precisely equidistant between two identical, equally appealing bales of hay. Being perfectly rational, the donkey analyzes the situation. There is no discernible reason to prefer the bale on the left over the bale on the right, they offer identical nourishment and require identical effort to reach. Because there is no rational basis for choosing one over the other, the donkey, unable to break the symmetry of the situation through reason alone, remains frozen in indecision between the two equally good options. It stands there, paralyzed by perfect rationality, and ultimately starves to death. This striking, albeit allegorical, scenario is known as Buridan's ass, a paradox often attributed to the 14th century philosopher Jean Buridan, though the core idea predates him. It serves as a powerful critique of certain models of rational choice and potentially free will, suggesting that pure rationality, when faced with perfectly equivalent options, might lead not to optimal decisions, but to complete inaction and paralysis. This mind-bending paradox questions whether reason alone is sufficient for action and whether perfect symmetry can paradoxically undermine existence itself, inviting contemplation on the limits of logic as you fall asleep. The paradox highlights a potential flaw in decision-making models that rely solely on identifying the best or most rational option based on maximizing utility or following sufficient reason. What happens when two or more options are perfectly equal in value and cost? If rationality demands a reason for choosing one over the other, and no such distinguishing reason exists, then rationality seems to dictate that no choice can be made. The donkey, adhering strictly to the principle of sufficient reason, the idea that nothing happens without a reason why it should be so and not otherwise, finds itself trapped. There is no sufficient reason to turn left rather than right or vice versa. Therefore, according to this strict interpretation of rationality, it cannot move. This scenario immediately clashes with our real-world experience. We rarely find ourselves paralyzed indefinitely between two identical cans of soup at the grocery store. Humans, and presumably real donkeys, manage to make choices even when faced with seemingly equivalent options. This suggests that something beyond pure comparative reason often breaks the deadlock. What could that be? One possibility is that the premise of perfect symmetry and perfect rationality is unrealistic. Perhaps there are always subtle, even unconscious, preferences or environmental cues that tip the balance. Maybe one bale of hay catches the donkey's eye slightly sooner, or a slight breeze carries its scent more strongly. Perhaps the donkey has a slight turning bias. In the real world, perfect equilibrium might be vanishingly rare. However, the paradox retains its force as a conceptual challenge. If such perfect symmetry were possible, what would a purely rational agent do? Another perspective suggests that the donkey's rationality is actually flawed. True rationality, some argue, involves recognizing the need to act, especially when inaction leads to a worse outcome, like starvation. In a situation of perfect indifference between two positive options, the rational thing to do might be to employ a tie-breaking mechanism, even an arbitrary one. The donkey could, perhaps, flip a mental coin, or simply initiate movement in any direction, recognizing that choosing either bale is vastly preferable to choosing neither. This introduces the idea that sometimes, rationality requires incorporating non-rational elements, like chance or arbitrary initiation, to overcome paralysis. Does this mean true rationality must sometimes be irrational in its methods? This connects to debates about free will and determinism. If the donkey's choice seems undetermined by reason due to symmetry, does this imply a space for free will to arbitrarily select one option? Or, if the donkey does eventually choose, perhaps due to a random neural firing or subtle external cue, does this suggest its action was ultimately determined by factors outside its rational deliberation, undermining the notion of a choice based purely on reason? Buridan's ass becomes a thought experiment exploring whether choices can be simultaneously rational and free when reasons run out. The paradox also serves as a powerful metaphor for analysis paralysis in human decision-making. While rarely facing perfectly identical options, we often encounter choices where the pros and cons seem so evenly balanced, or the options so numerous and complex, that we become overwhelmed and unable to commit. We keep gathering more information, weighing factors endlessly, searching for that elusive, sufficient reason to definitively favor one path, only to find ourselves stuck like the donkey, unable to move forward. The fear of making the wrong choice, even between two good options, can lead to the worst outcome, making no choice at all. The paradox warns against the potential dangers of excessive deliberation and the pursuit of perfect rational justification when timely action is needed. Furthermore, Buridan's ass questions the very sufficiency of reason as a guide to existence and action. It suggests that life might require more than just logic. It might necessitate leaps of faith, intuitive nudges, emotional preferences, or even arbitrary tiebreakers to navigate situations where reason alone falls silent. It hints that a purely rational being, devoid of these other capacities, might be surprisingly ill-equipped to function in a world of complex choices and occasional perfect symmetry. Philosophers like Spinoza address the problem by arguing that such perfect equilibrium is impossible in reality, as both the agent and the environment are always in flux, always presenting subtle asymmetries. Others might argue that the will itself provides the tie-breaking impetus. Yet, the conceptual paradox remains: what should a perfectly rational agent do when faced with perfect indifference? As you allow your mind to drift deeper into relaxation, picture the poor donkey frozen between two equally nourishing bales of hay. Feel the tension of perfect symmetry, the paralysis of reason unable to find a deciding factor. Contemplate the limits of logic when faced with indifference. Does rationality require a reason for every choice, or does it sometimes require simply choosing? Let the mystery of Buridan's ask dissolve any rigid attachment to pure reason as the sole guide for action. Find peace in acknowledging that intuition, feeling, chance, or even a simple, arbitrary nudge might sometimes be necessary to break the deadlock and move forward in life. Resting calmly, free from the paralysis of perfect indecision. Illusion of explanatory depth. Consider something you use every day, something familiar, perhaps even essential to your life: a bicycle, a zipper, a flushing toilet, a smartphone. You know how to use it, you understand its basic function. But do you truly understand how it works mechanistically, in detail? Could you explain the precise physics of bicycle stability, the intricate locking mechanism of a zipper's teeth, the siphon effect in a toilet bowl, or the layered software and hardware interactions in your phone? Most of us, if pressed for a detailed, step-by-step explanation, would quickly find our understanding is far shallower, far more superficial, than we initially believed. This pervasive cognitive phenomenon, our tendency to overestimate our understanding of complex systems and causal mechanisms, confusing familiarity and functional knowledge with deep explanatory insight, is known as the illusion of explanatory depth, IOED. It's a humbling psychology mystery, a paradox revealing that our subjective feeling of understanding often far outstrips our actual knowledge, questioning the very foundations of our perceived competence and expertise in navigating the world around us. Recognizing this illusion invites deep relaxation through intellectual humility. The illusion of explanatory depth was systematically explored by cognitive scientists Leonid Rosenblatt and Frank Keel. Through a series of studies, they asked participants to rate their understanding of various objects and systems. Then, they asked participants to actually explain how these things worked in as much detail as possible. Finally, participants rated their understanding again. Consistently, people's self-rated understanding plummeted after attempting to generate the explanation. The very act of trying to articulate the mechanism revealed the gaps and superficiality in their knowledge, shattering the initial illusion of comprehension. We feel like we understand how everyday objects work simply because we interact with them successfully and know their purpose. But this feeling is often based on a vague, high-level functional model, not a detailed mechanistic one. Why are we so susceptible to this illusion? Several cognitive factors contribute. We often confuse functional knowledge, knowing what something does or how to use it, with mechanistic knowledge, knowing how it achieves its function internally. We know a toilet flushes waste away, but that functional understanding doesn't equate to knowing the physics of siphons and valves involved. Our minds tend to store information efficiently, focusing on the necessary level of detail for interaction, not necessarily for deep causal explanation. We rely heavily on knowledge stored in the environment and in other people. We don't need to know how a car engine works in detail to drive it. We trust the engineers who designed it and the mechanics who fix it. This division of cognitive labor is highly efficient for society but can lead individuals to overestimate their personal understanding, as we implicitly rely on easily accessible external knowledge without realizing the gaps in our own internal knowledge. Furthermore, we often possess fragmentary knowledge, understanding certain parts or aspects of a system without grasping the whole interconnected mechanism. We might know that turning the key starts the car, but not understand the complex chain of events involving the battery, starter motor, fuel injection, and ignition that follows. Our minds might create a superficial sense of coherence by linking these fragments, overlooking the vast explanatory gaps between them. The subjective feeling of understanding seems to rely more on being able to access some relevant information and having a general sense of how things fit together, rather than possessing a complete, detailed causal model. The brain generates a gist, understanding, which feels sufficient until probed for specifics. The illusion of explanatory depth has significant implications across many domains. In education, students often believe they understand a concept far better than they actually do until they are forced to explain it, teach it to someone else, or apply it to a new problem. This highlights the importance of active recall and explanation, not just passive recognition, for genuine learning. In political discourse, people frequently hold strong opinions on complex policy issues, like healthcare reform or economic policy, with a vastly overestimated sense of understanding regarding the intricate mechanisms and potential consequences involved. Attempting to explain the details often reveals the superficiality of the understanding, yet the initial confidence persists, fueled by the illusion. This contributes to polarized and unproductive debates. In our relationship with technology, we interact daily with incredibly complex systems, smartphones, the internet, AI algorithms, with only the vaguest notion of how they actually function. The IOED allows us to use these tools effectively but can also leave us vulnerable, unable to troubleshoot problems, evaluate risks accurately, or make informed decisions about their use and regulation. We trust systems we don't truly comprehend. Even in personal understanding, we might overestimate how well we understand our own motivations, emotions, or even how our own bodies work. Introspection can be misleading. The feeling of self-knowledge doesn't always equate to accurate self-understanding. This cognitive bias is a humbling psychology mystery because it reveals a fundamental mismatch between our subjective confidence and our objective knowledge. It questions the reliability of our own feelings of comprehension. It suggests that much of our perceived understanding of the complex world we inhabit might be surprisingly shallow, a kind of cognitive veneer covering deeper levels of ignorance. It's a mind game because the things we feel most familiar with are often the things we understand the least at a mechanistic level. How can we counteract the illusion of explanatory depth? The most effective method is precisely the one used in the research: attempting to explain. Force yourself to articulate step by step how something works. Draw diagrams. Try to teach the concept to someone else. This process quickly reveals the gaps in your knowledge. Cultivate intellectual humility. Actively recognize that complex systems are often harder to understand than they appear. Be wary of strong feelings of understanding, especially for familiar but intricate systems. Ask probing questions both of yourself and others. Don't just ask, "What does it do?" but "How does it do it?" Seek out mechanistic details rather than settling for functional descriptions. Engage in active learning that requires generating explanations and applying knowledge, rather than just passive consumption of information. Breaking down complex systems into smaller parts and understanding how those parts interact can also deepen comprehension beyond a superficial overview. Understanding the illusion of explanatory depth fosters a more realistic assessment of our own knowledge and encourages genuine curiosity. It reminds us that familiarity is not the same as understanding. As you continue to fall asleep, gently acknowledge the potential gap between what you feel you understand and what you could actually explain in detail. Recognize this illusion not as a personal failing, but as a common feature of human cognition, born from efficiency and reliance on shared knowledge. Embrace the vastness of what you don't know with a sense of wonder rather than inadequacy. Find deep relaxation in letting go of the need to feel omniscient, resting peacefully in the quiet humility of knowing that genuine understanding is a lifelong journey of exploration. Molyneux's problem. Let us now consider a fascinating philosophical puzzle that bridges the gap between different senses, questioning the very nature of perception and how our minds construct a coherent model of reality from disparate sensory inputs. This is Molyneux's problem, first posed by the Irish scientist and politician William Molyneux in a letter to philosopher John Locke in 1688. Imagine a person born blind who has learned to distinguish between different shapes, say a cube and a sphere, purely through the sense of touch. They know, by feeling alone, which object is the cube and which is the sphere. Now, suppose this person suddenly gains the ability to see. Presented with the cube and the sphere visually without being allowed to touch them, would they be able to tell by sight alone which object is the cube and which is the sphere? This seemingly simple question delves into deep psychology mysteries about sensory integration, concept formation, and whether our understanding of properties like shape is inherently tied to a specific sense or exists as a more abstract concept transferable across modalities. Can knowledge gained through one sense automatically inform another? Molyneux's problem remains a compelling thought experiment exploring the relationship between touch, sight, and the mind's construction of spatial existence, inviting calm contemplation as you fall asleep. Molyneux himself, along with Locke, answered the question with a no. They reasoned, based on empiricist principles, that ideas derived from one sense, like the tactile feeling of a cube's edges and corners, are distinct from ideas derived from another sense, like the visual appearance of a cube with its perspectives and shading. The newly sighted person would initially see only patches of color and light. They would have no immediate basis for connecting these novel visual patterns to their pre-existing tactile concepts of cube and sphere. They would first need to learn through experience by touching the objects while looking at them, to associate the visual appearance with the tactile feeling and the corresponding label. Only after this cross-modal learning could they reliably identify the shapes by sight alone. In this view, our unified perception of objects across senses is not innate but built through experience and association. This perspective aligns with empiricism, the philosophical view that knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience. It suggests that concepts like shape are initially sense-specific and must be integrated through learning. However, other philosophers, particularly those in the rationalist tradition like Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, disagreed. Leibniz argued that concepts like shape are more abstract and geometrical, potentially accessible through reason or innate understanding independent of specific sensory modalities. He suggested that the newly sighted person might be able to deduce which visual shape corresponds to the cube and which to the sphere based on their understanding of geometric properties, like points and lines corresponding to corners and edges, which could be grasped through both touch and, theoretically, through reason applied to the new visual data. This view suggests a greater degree of innate conceptual structure or rational capacity for cross-modal transfer. Molyneux's problem thus became a key battleground in the historical debate between empiricism and rationalism regarding the origins of knowledge and concepts. It asks, is our understanding of the world built up piece by piece from raw sensory data, or do we possess innate conceptual frameworks that allow us to integrate information across senses more readily? For centuries, the problem remained purely a thought experiment. However, modern advancements in medicine, particularly cataract surgery and treatments for congenital blindness, have provided opportunities to study real-world cases that approximate Molyneux's scenario. While ethical considerations and the complexities of visual recovery after prolonged blindness make definitive conclusions difficult, the results have been fascinating and often support Molyneux's original intuition, though with nuances. Studies involving newly sighted individuals, often adults or older children who were blind from birth or early infancy, generally find that they are initially unable to reliably match objects visually with those they previously knew only by touch. They can often distinguish different visual shapes but cannot immediately label them correctly as cube or sphere based on prior tactile knowledge alone. They typically need a period of active learning, correlating their new visual experiences with their established tactile ones, to build these cross-modal connections. This seems to lend empirical weight to the empiricist perspective that such connections are learned, not innate. However, the story is complex. Some basic visual abilities, like perceiving figure ground separation or motion, might appear more rapidly. The process of learning to see meaningfully after blindness involves significant brain plasticity and adaptation. The results don't necessarily rule out all forms of innate structure or cross-modal predisposition, but they strongly suggest that the seamless integration of sensory information we take for granted is, to a large extent, a skill developed through experience. The enduring mystery of Molyneux's problem lies in understanding the precise mechanisms of this sensory integration. How does the brain learn to bind information from such different channels, the pressure and texture from touch, the patterns of light and color from sight, into a unified perception of a single object? How are abstract concepts like shape represented neurologically such that they can be accessed, or fail to be accessed, across different senses? It forces us to appreciate that our seemingly effortless perception of a unified, multisensory world is actually a remarkable cognitive achievement, constructed by intricate neural processes that are still not fully understood. It questions the very nature of sensory reality. Is the cube we touch the same thing as the cube we see, or are they initially distinct experiences that our brain learns to equate? As you continue to fall asleep, gently contemplate the richness of your own sensory world. The way sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell weave together to create your experience of reality. Consider the possibility, highlighted by Molyneux's problem, that this integration is a learned skill, a testament to your brain's remarkable ability to connect disparate streams of information. Let go of the assumption that perception is a simple window onto the world. Instead, appreciate it as an active construction, a dynamic interplay between your senses and your mind. Find deep relaxation in the quiet wonder of this intricate process, resting peacefully within the unified, yet mysteriously constructed sensory tapestry of your existence. The arrow of time paradox. If physics works backwards, why does time only move forwards? Time feels like the most natural thing in the universe. You wake up, you live your day, you go to sleep. Past becomes present, becomes future in an endless march forward. But here's where your brain starts to melt. The fundamental laws of physics don't actually care which direction time flows. Every equation that governs the behavior of particles, forces, and energy works perfectly well whether time moves forward or backward. Think about it this way. If you filmed a perfectly elastic collision between two billiard balls and played it backward, the physics would be identical. The conservation of momentum, the transfer of energy, the angles of deflection. Everything checks out in reverse. Newton's laws don't have a built-in arrow pointing toward the future. Einstein's relativity treats time as just another dimension, like height or width, with no preferred direction. So why do we experience time as having a direction? Why do eggs break but never spontaneously reassemble? Why do we remember the past but not the future? Why does entropy always increase, creating the irreversible march from order to chaos? This is where the paradox deepens into something almost mystical. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy, roughly, the amount of disorder in a system, always increases over time. A hot cup of coffee always cools down. It never spontaneously gets hotter by absorbing heat from the cooler air around it. But here's the thing. This law is statistical, not fundamental. It's based on probabilities, not ironclad physical principles. Imagine you have a box with 1,000,000 particles bouncing around. The second law says they'll tend to spread out evenly rather than cluster in one corner. But there's nothing physically preventing all those particles from randomly bouncing into the same corner at the same moment. It's just incredibly, unimaginably unlikely. So unlikely that it would never happen in the entire lifetime of the universe. But never and incredibly unlikely aren't the same thing. And this opens up a philosophical rabbit hole that makes you question the nature of reality itself. If the arrow of time is just a statistical tendency, not a fundamental law, then what makes your experience of flowing time real? Are you just a pattern of particles following probability, creating the illusion of temporal flow through pure chance? Some physicists argue that time's arrow emerges from the initial conditions of the universe. The Big Bang created a state of extremely low entropy, everything packed into an infinitesimally small point. Since then, the universe has been expanding and entropy has been increasing, creating the arrow of time we experience. But this just pushes the question back. Why did the universe start in such a low entropy state? Why not start in maximum entropy where nothing would ever change? Others suggest that time's arrow is connected to consciousness itself. Maybe the direction of time is created by the act of observation, by minds that can remember the past and anticipate the future. In this view, time doesn't flow. Instead, consciousness creates the experience of flow by linking moments together into a coherent narrative. You don't move through time, you create time by remembering. But this raises even more disturbing questions. If consciousness creates the arrow of time, what happens when you're not conscious? Does time stop flowing when you're asleep? Does the universe cease to have a temporal direction during those hours when your mind is offline? Or does time exist independently, and consciousness just creates the illusion of experiencing its flow? The paradox becomes even stranger when you consider quantum mechanics. In the quantum world, particles exist in superposition. They're in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Some interpretations suggest that observation doesn't just reveal reality, it creates reality by collapsing the wave function. If this is true, then consciousness isn't just experiencing the arrow of time, it's actively creating it moment by moment through the act of observation. Think about what this means for your existence. Every memory you have, every experience that makes you who you are, depends on time having a direction. Your entire sense of self is built on the assumption that cause precedes effect, that your actions have consequences, that you can learn from the past and plan for the future. But if the arrow of time is just an emergent property, a statistical accident, or even an illusion created by consciousness, then what does that say about the reality of your experiences? Consider this thought experiment. Imagine a universe where entropy occasionally decreases, where broken eggs spontaneously reassemble, where scattered particles randomly organize themselves into complex structures. In such a universe, would consciousness be possible? Would you be able to form memories if the past could literally unmake itself? Would learning be possible if effects could precede their causes? The arrow of time paradox forces us to confront the possibility that everything we consider real and meaningful, memory, causation, progress, even existence itself, might be nothing more than a cosmic accident. A temporary deviation from the true timeless nature of reality, where past and future are equally real and equally accessible. Yet here you are, experiencing this moment as uniquely present, feeling the flow of time carry you from past to future. Whether this experience is fundamental or illusory, whether time truly flows or consciousness creates the experience of flow, you're trapped in the arrow of time. You can't escape it, can't step outside it to see reality from a timeless perspective. This is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the paradox. Even if time's arrow is an illusion, it's an inescapable illusion. You can intellectually understand that the laws of physics are time-symmetric, but you can't experience that symmetry. You're locked into a temporal perspective that may be nothing more than a statistical fluke in an otherwise timeless universe. The arrow of time paradox doesn't just question the nature of time, it questions the reality of your entire existence. Are you a real entity moving through time, or are you a pattern in the flow of entropy, a temporary organization of matter and energy that creates the illusion of selfhood through the accident of temporal flow? The physics can't tell you. The mathematics works equally well in either direction. Only your consciousness insists that time has meaning, that the present moment is special, that the arrow of time is real. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the reality of your experience, regardless of its ultimate physical basis, is what makes the arrow of time meaningful. Maybe consciousness doesn't just observe time's flow, maybe it creates the very meaning that makes temporal existence worth having. The problem of moral luck. How much credit or blame do you deserve for how things turn out? You make a choice. You act. Something happens as a result. The world judges you based on the outcome. This seems like the foundation of moral responsibility, the bedrock of ethics and justice. But here's what will keep you awake at night. How much of what you're praised or blamed for is actually under your control? Two drunk drivers leave bars on the same night. They're equally intoxicated, equally reckless, equally irresponsible. They make the same terrible decision to get behind the wheel. One makes it home safely and sleeps off his stupidity. The other strikes and kills a child who happened to run into the street at exactly the wrong moment. One faces a DUI charge. The other faces vehicular manslaughter and a lifetime of guilt. Same choice, same level of negligence, vastly different moral judgment. This is moral luck, and it reveals something deeply troubling about how we assign responsibility. The difference in outcomes had nothing to do with the driver's intentions, their character, or their level of care. It was pure chance, the random presence or absence of a child in the street. Yet society, and likely the drivers themselves, will judge their actions as fundamentally different. Think about your own life. How many times have you taken risks that could have ended badly but didn't? How many potentially catastrophic decisions have you made that turned out fine through sheer luck? Every time you've texted while driving, every shortcut you've taken through a dangerous neighborhood, every time you've been careless with someone's feelings, the outcomes depended as much on chance as on your choices. The philosopher Thomas Nagel identified 4 types of moral luck that contaminate our attempts to make fair judgments. Constitutional luck deals with the basic temperament and personality you're born with. Did you choose to be naturally aggressive or naturally calm? Did you select your genetic predisposition toward addiction, your innate capacity for empathy, your baseline level of impulse control? Yet these inherited traits profoundly influence your moral choices. Circumstantial luck involves the situations you find yourself in. A person born into wealth faces different moral challenges than someone born into poverty. The privileged person might become a philanthropist or a trust fund narcissist. The poor person might become a saint or a criminal. But the circumstances that shape these paths aren't chosen. You don't pick your parents, your country, your historical moment. Yet these factors create the moral landscape in which all your choices occur. Antecedent luck concerns the formative experiences that shape your character. The abusive childhood that creates a violent adult, the loving family that nurtures compassion, the random encounters that inspire or corrupt. None of these are under your control, yet they determine the kind of person you become. How can you be fully responsible for actions that flow from a character you didn't choose to develop? And then there's resultant luck, the kind that creates our two drunk drivers with their vastly different fates. This might be the most disturbing type because it seems to suggest that moral evaluation should focus on outcomes rather than intentions. But if outcomes depend on factors beyond our control, then moral judgment becomes a matter of cosmic lottery rather than ethical assessment. Consider the deeper implications. If your character is shaped by luck, your circumstances are determined by chance, and your outcomes depend on random factors, what exactly are you responsible for? What remains when we strip away everything that's beyond your control? Some philosophers argue that nothing remains, that moral responsibility is an illusion, a useful fiction that helps society function but has no ultimate basis in reality. This view leads to what philosophers call hard determinism. Every action you take is the inevitable result of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of time. Your brain is a biological machine following the laws of physics. Your thoughts and decisions emerge from neural processes that were set in motion by factors completely outside your control. Free will, in this view, is an illusion created by your inability to perceive the causal chains that determine your behavior. But if moral responsibility is an illusion, then the entire structure of ethics collapses. Praise and blame become meaningless. Justice becomes impossible. Love and gratitude lose their rational foundation. If no one is truly responsible for anything, then moral discourse becomes an elaborate charade, a collective delusion that serves no purpose beyond social control. Yet most people find this conclusion impossible to accept. Despite understanding the role of luck in shaping outcomes, you still feel responsible for your choices. You still experience guilt when you do wrong and pride when you do right. You still hold others accountable for their actions, even while recognizing the role of chance in their lives. This creates a paradox at the heart of human existence. You can't live as if you're not responsible for your choices, yet you can't ignore the role of luck in determining outcomes. You must act as if free will exists while knowing that your actions emerge from factors beyond your control. You must make moral judgments while recognizing their ultimate arbitrariness. Some philosophers try to thread this needle by distinguishing between ultimate and practical responsibility. You may not be ultimately responsible for your character or circumstances, but you can still be practically responsible for your choices within those constraints. This view suggests that moral responsibility isn't about deserving ultimate credit or blame, but about being the kind of agent who can respond to moral reasons and modify behavior based on feedback. But this compromise feels unsatisfying. It doesn't resolve the fundamental tension between the randomness of outcomes and the human need for moral meaning. It doesn't explain why some people deserve harsher judgment for unlucky outcomes when their choices were no worse than those who got lucky. The problem of moral luck forces you to confront the possibility that your entire moral framework is built on sand. Every judgment you make about yourself and others is contaminated by factors beyond anyone's control. Every feeling of guilt or pride is based on outcomes that depended as much on chance as on choice. Every system of justice is fundamentally arbitrary, punishing and rewarding based on the cosmic lottery rather than true desert. Yet you can't escape the need to make moral judgments. You can't stop feeling responsible for your actions or holding others accountable for theirs. You can't live without praise and blame, guilt and pride, justice and mercy. These moral emotions and practices may be based on illusions, but they're inescapable illusions that define human existence. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of moral luck is that recognizing it doesn't make it go away. You can understand intellectually that your successes depend partly on luck, but you'll still feel proud of your achievements. You can know that your failures involve factors beyond your control, but you'll still feel guilty about your mistakes. You can see that others' actions emerge from circumstances they didn't choose, but you'll still judge them based on outcomes. The problem of moral luck reveals the tragic nature of human moral experience. You're condemned to make judgments you know are unfair, to take responsibility you know is partly illusory, to praise and blame based on outcomes you know depend on chance. You're moral agents in a world where moral agency itself may be impossible. Greeling-Nelson Paradox. Is the word non-self-describing self-describing? Language folding on itself. Language is supposed to be our tool for describing reality, for creating meaning, for communicating truth. We build elaborate structures of words and concepts, believing they can capture the essence of things. But what happens when language turns its descriptive power on itself? What happens when words try to describe words, when concepts attempt to categorize concepts? This is where the Greeling-Nelson Paradox reveals something deeply unsettling about the very nature of meaning itself. The paradox begins with a simple distinction between two types of words, autological and heterological. An autological word describes itself. The word short is short. The word English is English. The word polysyllabic is polysyllabic. These words have the property they describe. A heterological word, on the other hand, doesn't describe itself. The word long is not long, it's actually quite short. The word German is not German, it's English. The word monosyllabic is not monosyllabic, it has 5 syllables. This seems straightforward enough. Every descriptive word should fall neatly into one category or the other. It either describes itself or it doesn't. But then comes the question that breaks everything. Is the word heterological heterological? If heterological is heterological, then it doesn't describe itself. But if it doesn't describe itself, then it is heterological, which means it does describe itself. But if it describes itself, then it's not heterological. The word creates a logical loop that cannot be resolved. It's neither heterological nor not heterological. It exists in a state of self-referential impossibility. This might seem like a clever linguistic puzzle, but it points to something much more profound and disturbing about the nature of language itself. The paradox reveals that language, when applied to itself, can generate statements that are neither true nor false but logically impossible. It shows that our most basic tool for understanding reality contains fundamental contradictions that cannot be resolved. Think about what this means for human knowledge. Every concept you use to make sense of the world is expressed in language. Every truth you believe, every fact you know, every idea you hold, all of it exists within the structure of language. But if language contains internal contradictions, if it can generate impossible statements, then what does that say about the reliability of everything you think you know? The heterological paradox is part of a family of self-referential paradoxes that have plagued logic and philosophy for centuries. The liar paradox presents a similar problem. This statement is false. If the statement is true, then it's false. If it's false, then it's true. Like the heterological paradox, it creates a logical impossibility that seems to reveal something broken in the structure of truth itself. These paradoxes suggest that language and logic contain inherent limitations. There are things that cannot be consistently said, truths that cannot be coherently expressed, concepts that dissolve into contradiction when examined too closely. This isn't just an academic curiosity, it strikes at the heart of human reason itself. Consider how this affects your daily experience of meaning. Every time you use language to describe something, you're relying on the assumption that words can consistently refer to properties, that descriptions can reliably capture truth. But the heterological paradox shows that this assumption breaks down when language becomes self-referential. And since language is always, in some sense, referring to itself, using words to define other words, concepts to explain other concepts, the potential for paradox lurks everywhere. Think about the word meaning itself. Does the word meaning have meaning? If it does, then its meaning includes its own meaningfulness, creating a kind of recursive loop. If it doesn't, then how can it refer to the concept of meaning at all? The very attempt to understand meaning through language may be doomed to circularity or contradiction. This problem extends beyond individual words to entire systems of thought. Any logical system that can refer to itself, that can make statements about its own validity, consistency, or completeness, is vulnerable to paradox. Kurt Gödel proved this mathematically in his incompleteness theorems, showing that any sufficiently powerful logical system must contain statements that cannot be proven true or false within that system. The heterological paradox reveals the linguistic equivalent of this mathematical truth. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. You can't escape language. You can't step outside the system of words and concepts to examine it objectively. Every thought you have, every attempt to understand the problem, every effort to resolve the paradox, all of it takes place within language. You're trapped inside a system that contains fundamental contradictions, with no way to transcend those limitations. The paradox also reveals something troubling about the nature of classification itself. Human knowledge depends on our ability to categorize things, to sort the world into types and kinds. But the heterological paradox shows that some categories cannot consistently classify themselves. If the basic logical operation of categorization breaks down when applied recursively, what does that say about all the other ways we organize reality? Consider the implications for self-knowledge. The attempt to understand yourself through language, to describe your own thoughts, feelings, and experiences, may be inherently paradoxical. Every self-referential statement about your own mental states relies on the same logical structure that creates the heterological paradox. I am thinking is a thought about thinking. I am conscious is a conscious statement about consciousness. These statements hover on the edge of the same logical abyss. Some philosophers argue that these paradoxes reveal the need for hierarchical approaches to truth and meaning. We need to distinguish between different levels of language, object language and meta-language, first-order statements and higher-order statements. But this solution seems to multiply entities unnecessarily, creating an infinite hierarchy of linguistic levels to avoid contradiction. And it doesn't resolve the basic problem. Language seems inherently incapable of giving a complete, consistent account of itself. Others suggest that natural language is simply too imprecise for rigorous logical analysis, that these paradoxes arise from the ambiguity and context dependence of ordinary words. But this response misses the deeper point. These aren't mere technical problems to be solved by more precise formulation. They reveal something fundamental about the relationship between language and reality, between thought and truth. The heterological paradox forces you to confront the possibility that language, the very medium through which you understand everything else, is fundamentally flawed. It suggests that meaning itself may be unstable, that truth may be relative to linguistic frameworks, that knowledge may be bounded by the contradictions inherent in any system of representation. Yet you continue to use language to make statements, to seek truth through words. You have no choice. Even recognizing the paradox requires language. Even doubting meaning requires meaningful statements. Even questioning truth requires truth claims. You're condemned to reason within a system that contains the seeds of its own logical destruction. This is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the heterological paradox. It doesn't just reveal a problem with certain types of statements. It suggests that the entire enterprise of using language to understand reality may be fundamentally compromised. Every word you speak, every thought you think, every truth you believe exists within a system that cannot consistently describe itself. The paradox leaves you suspended between meaning and meaninglessness, between the necessity of language and its inherent limitations. You must continue to speak and think and reason, knowing that the very tools you're using contain contradictions that cannot be resolved. You must pursue truth through a medium that generates impossibilities when examined too closely. Language doesn't just fold in on itself in the heterological paradox. It reveals its own essential instability. And since you are a linguistic being, since your thoughts and knowledge and identity are all constructed through language, this instability infects everything you think you know about yourself and the world. The paradox of the court, Protagoras versus Ulysses. When does a perfect contract become logically impossible? A master and student make what seems like a perfectly reasonable agreement. The teacher will provide instruction. The student will pay for that instruction. But they add a twist that transforms a simple contract into a logical nightmare that reveals something deeply disturbing about the nature of justice, agreement, and truth itself. Protagoras, the great sophist teacher of ancient Greece, agreed to teach rhetoric and legal argumentation to his student Ulysses. The fee was substantial, but they arranged a creative payment plan. Ulysses would pay half the fee up front for the lessons. The other half would be due only after Ulysses won his first court case. If he never won a case, he would never owe the second payment. It seemed fair to both parties. The teacher got some immediate payment and an incentive to teach well, while the student only paid the full amount if the education proved successful. But Ulysses was a clever student who learned his lessons perhaps too well. After completing his education, he simply refused to take any court cases. If he never argued in court, he would never win or lose and therefore would never owe the second payment. He had found what seemed like a perfect loophole in their agreement. Protagoras, being a master of rhetoric and legal reasoning, was not to be outwitted so easily. He decided to sue his student for the unpaid fee. But this is where the contract reveals its paradoxical nature, creating a logical impossibility that cannot be resolved within any consistent system of justice. Consider the dilemma from both perspectives. If Protagoras wins the lawsuit, then by the court's judgment, Ulysses owes the money. But if Ulysses loses this case, he has still not won his first case, so according to the original contract, he doesn't owe the second payment. The court's judgment would contradict the contractual terms that the court is supposed to enforce. From Ulysses's perspective, the situation is equally impossible. If he wins the lawsuit, then the court has ruled that he doesn't owe the money. But by winning this case, his first legal victory, he has triggered the contract's payment clause. According to their original agreement, winning his first case means he now owes the second payment. His legal victory becomes a contractual defeat. This creates a perfect logical loop that cannot be resolved. No matter who wins the lawsuit, both winning and losing create contradictory obligations. The contract contains within itself the seeds of its own logical destruction. It's neither enforceable nor unenforceable. It exists in a state of legal impossibility. But this isn't just an ancient curiosity or a clever logical puzzle. The Protagoras paradox reveals something fundamental about the nature of legal systems, contracts, and human agreements more generally. It shows that carefully constructed rules can generate situations where following the rules becomes logically impossible. Think about what this means for the concept of justice itself. Legal systems are built on the assumption that rights and obligations can be clearly defined, that contracts can establish enforceable duties, that courts can determine what people owe each other. But the Protagoras paradox demonstrates that even carefully crafted agreements can create situations where justice becomes undefinable. The paradox also reveals the self-referential problems that plague any system of rules. The contract refers to its own fulfillment as a condition for payment. This self-reference creates the logical loop that makes the contract impossible to enforce. But most complex agreements contain some degree of self-reference. They define their own terms, specify their own conditions for fulfillment, establish their own criteria for breach. The potential for paradox lurks in any sufficiently complex contractual arrangement. Consider modern examples. Software licenses that prohibit reverse engineering but require users to verify that the software doesn't violate other licenses. Employment contracts that require loyalty but also compliance with whistleblower laws. International treaties that establish their own dispute resolution mechanisms but defer to national sovereignty. Each contains the potential for self-referential contradictions. The paradox becomes even more troubling when you consider its implications for promise-keeping and moral obligation. If even explicit, voluntary agreements can generate logical impossibilities, what does that say about the nature of commitment itself? How can you make binding promises in a world where the logic of obligation can fold in on itself? Some legal scholars argue that the paradox reveals the need for external meta-principles to resolve contractual contradictions. Courts shouldn't just interpret contracts. They should apply overarching principles of fairness, reasonableness, or social utility. But this solution undermines the autonomy of contracting parties. If courts can override explicit agreements based on external principles, then what's the point of careful contractual drafting? Others suggest that the paradox shows the inherent limitations of formal logical analysis applied to human institutions. Legal systems aren't mathematical structures. They're social practices embedded in historical contexts with pragmatic purposes. Paradoxes like this one arise when we try to treat law as pure logic rather than recognizing its essentially practical nature. But these responses miss the deeper philosophical implications. The Protagoras paradox doesn't just reveal problems with legal reasoning. It exposes the fragility of human attempts to create binding obligations through language. Every promise, every commitment, every agreement depends on the assumption that words can establish stable, enforceable duties. But if language itself can generate logical impossibilities, then the entire edifice of human cooperation built on explicit agreements becomes questionable. The paradox also illuminates the problem of self-enforcement in human institutions. The contract between Protagoras and Ulysses breaks down precisely because it tries to make its own enforcement part of its conditions. But all legal systems face this problem at some level. Laws that define their own jurisdiction, courts that establish their own authority, constitutions that specify their own amendment procedures, each contains the potential for self-referential contradiction. Think about your own commitments and promises. Every agreement you make, every obligation you accept, every duty you acknowledge relies on the assumption that the terms of the agreement can be clearly defined and consistently applied. But the Protagoras paradox suggests that this assumption may be fundamentally flawed. Any sufficiently complex commitment contains the potential for logical contradiction. This creates a kind of existential anxiety about the nature of human cooperation. If explicit agreements can become logically impossible, how can you ever be certain about your obligations to others? How can you make binding commitments when the logic of commitment itself may be incoherent? How can legal systems maintain legitimacy when they may be built on foundations that can collapse into paradox? The paradox forces you to confront the possibility that human attempts to create order through rules and agreements may be inherently unstable. Every contract, every law, every institutional arrangement represents an attempt to impose logical structure on human relationships. But if logic itself can generate impossibilities when applied reflexively, then these attempts at order may be doomed to eventual contradiction. Yet you continue to make agreements, accept obligations, and expect others to honor their commitments. You live as if contracts can be enforced, promises can be kept, and justice can be achieved through legal systems. You have no choice. Human cooperation requires the assumption that agreements can establish stable obligations, even if logic suggests that this assumption may be false. The Protagoras paradox reveals the tragic nature of human attempts to create binding obligations. You must live as if perfect contracts are possible while knowing that perfection itself may be logically contradictory. You must make promises while understanding that the logic of promising contains inherent limitations. You must seek justice through legal systems that may be founded on logical impossibilities. The perfect contract becomes impossible not because of human failings or inadequate drafting, but because perfection itself, when it includes self-reference, generates paradox. And since you are self-referential beings, since your agreements are about your own future actions, since your promises commit your future selves, the potential for paradox infects every human commitment. Russell's paradox. The set of all sets that don't contain themselves, can logic define everything? Mathematics was supposed to be the one safe harbor in the storm of human uncertainty. Unlike philosophy with its endless debates, unlike science with its evolving theories, mathematics seemed to offer absolute truth, unshakable foundations, perfect logical certainty. Then Bertrand Russell discovered something that shook mathematics to its core and revealed that even our most rigorous thinking contains the seeds of its own destruction. The story begins with set theory, the branch of mathematics that deals with collections of objects. Sets seemed like the perfect foundation for all of mathematics. Everything could be understood as sets: numbers, functions, geometric shapes, even abstract concepts. A set is simply a collection of things. The set of all prime numbers, the set of all read objects, the set of all books in your library. Simple, clear, logical. Set theory had rules. Sets could contain other sets as members. The set of all mathematics textbooks contains individual books, but you could also have a set that contains sets of books, perhaps organized by subject or author. Some sets contain themselves as members. The set of all abstract concepts is itself an abstract concept, so it belongs to itself. The set of all sets mentioned in this discussion includes itself, since it's a set being mentioned in this discussion. Other sets don't contain themselves. The set of all books is not itself a book, it's a set. The set of all numbers is not a number, it's a collection. This seemed perfectly reasonable. Every set either contains itself as a member or it doesn't. A simple, clear distinction that would help organize all of mathematics. Russell asked a seemingly innocent question. What about the set of all sets that don't contain themselves? Let's call this set R. By definition, R contains exactly those sets that are not members of themselves. This seems like a perfectly legitimate mathematical object. We're simply collecting all the sets that have the property of not containing themselves. But then Russell asked the fatal question. Does R contain itself? If R contains itself, then by definition, R must be a set that doesn't contain itself. But if R doesn't contain itself, then it has the defining property of sets that belong to R, which means R must contain itself. We have a perfect logical contradiction. R contains itself if and only if R doesn't contain itself. This isn't just a clever word puzzle or a philosophical curiosity. Russell's paradox strikes at the heart of mathematical logic itself. It shows that the naive concept of set, the idea that any well-defined property determines a set of objects having that property, leads to logical contradiction. The very foundations of mathematics contain internal inconsistencies. The implications are staggering. Mathematics was supposed to be the one domain where human reason could achieve perfect certainty. Mathematical proofs were eternal truths, immune to revision or doubt. But Russell's paradox suggests that even mathematical reasoning, when pushed to its limits, generates impossibilities. The tool we use to think about everything else, logic itself, may be fundamentally flawed. Think about what this means for human knowledge. Every scientific theory, every philosophical argument, every attempt to understand reality relies on logical reasoning. We use logic to test hypotheses, to derive conclusions, to build systems of knowledge. But if logic contains internal contradictions, if reasoning itself can generate paradoxes, then what confidence can we have in any of our conclusions? The paradox also reveals something disturbing about the concept of totality. Humans have always tried to think about everything, the universe, reality, existence itself. We want comprehensive theories that account for all phenomena, complete systems that leave nothing out. But Russell's paradox suggests that the concept of everything may be inherently contradictory. The attempt to collect all objects into a single comprehensive system generates logical impossibility. Consider the philosophical implications. Can there be a theory of everything? Can human reason ever achieve complete understanding? Russell's paradox suggests that any system comprehensive enough to include itself becomes logically inconsistent. Total knowledge may be not just practically impossible but logically contradictory. The paradox forced mathematicians to develop more sophisticated approaches to set theory. They created axiom systems that avoided Russell's contradiction by restricting which collections count as legitimate sets. But these solutions come with cost. They abandon the naive idea that every property determines a set. They introduce arbitrary-seeming restrictions on mathematical reasoning. They suggest that mathematics itself may be more limited and fragmented than we hoped. Some mathematicians embraced these limitations. They argued that Russell's paradox teaches humility about the power of human reason. Mathematical systems are human constructions with built-in limitations, not windows into absolute truth. This view suggests that all of our knowledge systems, not just mathematics, may contain inherent boundaries that cannot be transcended. Others found this conclusion deeply unsettling. If mathematics, our most rigorous form of reasoning, contains fundamental limitations, what hope is there for human understanding? If even logic can generate contradictions, how can we trust any of our conclusions about reality? The paradox seemed to undermine the entire Enlightenment project of using reason to understand the world. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Russell's paradox is what it reveals about self-reference. The contradiction arises precisely because we try to apply set theory to itself, to create sets that are defined in terms of their own membership relations. But self-reference is unavoidable in human thought. Every theory must account for its own status. Every system of knowledge must explain its own validity. Every logical framework must justify its own consistency. This creates what philosophers call the problem of reflexivity. How can reason examine itself without generating paradox? How can logic justify logic? How can any system of thought provide a complete account of its own foundations? Russell's paradox suggests that perfect self-understanding may be logically impossible. The paradox also illuminates the relationship between language and reality. Mathematical sets are linguistic constructions, ways of talking about collections of objects. But Russell's paradox shows that these linguistic constructions can generate contradictions that seem to reveal something about the nature of reality itself. Does the paradox tell us something about the logical structure of the universe, or does it just reveal the limitations of human language and thought? This question becomes even more troubling when you consider that you are a self-referential system. Your consciousness includes awareness of itself. Your mind thinks about its own thinking. You are, in a sense, a set that contains itself as a member. If self-reference inevitably generates paradox, what does that say about the coherence of consciousness itself? Think about the statement, "I am thinking about my own thoughts." This seems perfectly meaningful, but it has the same self-referential structure that creates Russell's paradox. Are you a logically consistent entity, or do you exist in a state of fundamental contradiction? Is consciousness itself a kind of paradox? A system that includes itself and therefore transcends the limitations of purely logical analysis? Russell's paradox forces you to confront the possibility that perfect logical consistency may be impossible for any system complex enough to refer to itself. Since human beings are self-aware, since our knowledge systems must account for their own validity, since consciousness includes awareness of consciousness, we may be fundamentally paradoxical entities. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it suggests that the contradictions and uncertainties in human experience aren't failures to be overcome but inevitable features of self-referential systems. You don't need to achieve perfect logical consistency to be real, to have valid experiences, to create meaningful knowledge. The paradox shows that even mathematics, our paradigm of logical rigor, contains irreducible mysteries. But it's also terrifying because it suggests that the human quest for complete understanding may be doomed from the start. Every attempt to create a comprehensive theory, every effort to achieve total knowledge, every aspiration to perfect rationality contains the potential for self-referential contradiction. The very ambition to understand everything may be logically incoherent. Yet you continue to reason, to build theories, to seek understanding. You have no choice. Even recognizing the limitations revealed by Russell's paradox requires logical reasoning. Even doubting the consistency of logic requires logical arguments. Even accepting the impossibility of complete knowledge represents a kind of knowledge claim. The paradox reveals that you exist in a state of logical tension. You must use reason while acknowledging its limitations, seek truth while accepting its elusiveness, build systems of knowledge while recognizing their incompleteness. You're condemned to think with tools that contain the seeds of their own contradiction. This is perhaps Russell's deepest insight. The paradox doesn't just reveal a technical problem in set theory, it exposes the fundamental condition of rational beings in a complex universe. We are systems trying to understand systems, minds attempting to comprehend minds, logical entities seeking to grasp the nature of logic itself. The potential for paradox isn't a bug in human reasoning. It's an inevitable feature of self-referential intelligence. Russell's paradox stands as a monument to both the power and the limitations of human reason. It shows that logic can uncover its own contradictions, that mathematics can reveal its own boundaries, that rational analysis can discover the limits of rationality itself. In questioning whether logic can define everything, the paradox provides its own answer. Logic is powerful enough to reveal its own impossibilities, but not powerful enough to resolve them. The set of all sets that don't contain themselves cannot exist in any consistent logical system. But the fact that we can formulate this impossibility, understand its implications, and grapple with its consequences reveals something profound about human consciousness. We are the kinds of beings who can think impossible thoughts, confront logical contradictions, and continue reasoning even when reason reveals its own limitations. In the end, Russell's paradox doesn't destroy mathematics or undermine human knowledge. Instead, it reveals the strange, wonderful, and ultimately paradoxical nature of minds capable of reflecting on their own reflection. We are living contradictions in the best possible sense. Rational beings who can recognize the limits of rationality, logical entities who can think beyond the boundaries of logic, finite minds reaching toward infinite understanding. The paradox teaches us that the question, can logic define everything, has a definitive answer: no. But in learning this limitation, we discover something even more remarkable, that we are the kinds of beings who can ask questions that have no answers, think thoughts that cannot be consistently formulated, and find meaning in the very contradictions that define our existence. The transparency of experience illusion. Consider your perception of the world right now. Even with eyes closed, perhaps you sense the space around you, the textures, the temperature. If your eyes were open, you'd see colors, shapes, objects, seemingly presented directly to your awareness, as if your consciousness were a clear window looking out onto reality itself. This feeling of direct, unmediated access to the qualities of the world, the redness of red seeming to be out there in the object, the smoothness residing on the surface, is incredibly compelling. Yet, contemporary philosophy of mind and cognitive science suggest this feeling might be a profound illusion. The transparency of experience illusion refers to our strong intuition that the qualities we experience are properties of the external world being directly apprehended, when in fact, they might be properties of our internal representation, qualities generated by the brain as part of its interpretation process. Are you truly seeing the inherent redness of a rose, or are you experiencing your brain's internal representation of redness, triggered by certain wavelengths of light, a representation that feels transparently projected onto the world? This paradox challenges the very nature of perception, questioning the boundary between mind and world, and suggesting your immediate subjective experience might be more of an intricate construction than a direct reflection of external existence. Let this subtle veil between you and the world gently thin as you fall asleep. Think about the experience of color. We perceive objects as having intrinsic colors. A ripe tomato is red. But physics tells us the tomato's surface absorbs certain wavelengths of light and reflects others. These reflected wavelengths strike our retina, triggering complex neural processes in our visual cortex. The experience of redness is the end result of this intricate neural computation. There is no redness residing independently in the photons or on the tomato surface. There are only physical properties that cause our specific type of brain to generate the subjective quality, the qualia, of red. The feeling that the redness is out there is the illusion of transparency. We look through our internal representation as if it were a window onto the external property itself. Our brain cleverly projects its internal creation onto the perceived external object. This applies not just to color but potentially to all sensory qualities. The feeling of warmth isn't necessarily the heat itself, but the brain's interpretation of increased molecular motion registered by skin receptors. The sound of a bell isn't the vibrations in the air themselves, but the brain's transduction and interpretation of those vibrations into auditory experience. Even seemingly solid objects are experienced through interpretations of sensory data, patterns of light, tactile pressure, proprioceptive feedback, all integrated by the brain into a model of an external world. According to this view, championed by philosophers like Michael Tai and some neuroscientists, the qualitative content of our experience, the what it's like, resides entirely within our neural representations. We don't directly experience the world, we experience the brain's model of the world, a model so effective and seamless that it feels transparent, feels like the world itself. This idea raises profound questions about our connection to reality. If our experience is always mediated by the brain's interpretation, can we ever truly know what the world is like, in itself, independent of our perception? This echoes Kant's distinction between phenomena, the world as it appears to us, and noumena, the world as it is in itself, suggesting a fundamental epistemological gap imposed by the nature of our minds. We are always experiencing reality through the filter, or interface, of our nervous system and cognitive architecture. While this interface is remarkably effective for survival and navigation, it may not provide a perfectly accurate or direct picture of objective reality. The very qualities that make up our subjective experience might be features of the map, our brain's representation, not the territory, the external world. Consider phenomena like synesthesia, which we explored previously, where sensory inputs get cross-wired, leading someone to see colors when hearing sounds. This demonstrates that the specific qualia experienced are not solely determined by the external stimulus but by the internal neural processing. Consider optical illusions, where our perception demonstrably differs from the physical reality. These aren't just quirks, they reveal the constructive, interpretive nature of perception. The brain makes assumptions, fills in gaps, and generates experiences based on best guesses derived from sensory input and prior knowledge. The feeling of direct realism, the transparency, breaks down when these processes are revealed. The illusion of transparency is a subtle mind bend because it challenges our most basic, intuitive relationship with the world. It suggests that the vibrant, qualitative richness of our experience might be generated within us, not passively received from without. It questions what it means to see or touch reality. Are we truly making contact, or are we interacting with a sophisticated internal simulation generated by our brain in response to external stimuli? This perspective doesn't necessarily lead to skepticism about the existence of an external world. Most proponents believe our representations are reliably caused by and track external reality, but it profoundly alters our understanding of how we experience it. The qualities themselves are seen as properties of the representation, not the represented. Does this diminish the beauty of a sunset or the warmth of human connection? Not necessarily. The subjective reality generated by our brains is our experienced reality, the only one we have direct access to. Its richness and meaning remain intact. However, understanding the potential illusion of transparency fosters intellectual humility. It reminds us that our perception is an interpretation, not a perfect mirror. It encourages critical thinking about the relationship between subjective feeling and objective properties. It opens up space for wondering about the different ways other beings, with different sensory systems and brains, might experience the same reality. As you continue to fall asleep, gently observe the sensations arising in your awareness. The feeling of breath, the ambient sounds, the darkness behind your eyelids. Consider the possibility that these qualities are not properties of the air, the sound waves, or the darkness itself, but properties of your brain's representation. A representation so seamless it feels transparent. Let go of the need to firmly grasp an external reality independent of your perception. Find deep relaxation in acknowledging the profound mystery of how your brain constructs your experienced world. Appreciate the richness of your subjective experience, whether it's a direct window or an intricate internal painting, resting peacefully within the beautiful, perhaps illusory transparency of consciousness. Terror management theory. We move through life often preoccupied with immediate concerns, relationships, work, daily tasks. Yet, lurking beneath the surface of conscious thought, according to a compelling and sometimes unsettling psychological framework, lies a fundamental, deeply repressed fear. The fear of death, the terror of annihilation. Terror management theory, TMT, developed by social psychologists Jeff Greenberg, Sheldon Solomon, and Tom Piskczynski, proposes that much of human culture, motivation, and behavior, from our striving for self-esteem and close relationships to our adherence to cultural worldviews, patriotism, and even prejudice, serves as a complex psychological defense mechanism designed to manage the potentially paralyzing terror stemming from our awareness of inevitable mortality. Are our lives, our values, our grandest projects, significantly driven by an unconscious attempt to deny or transcend the finality of death? This profound psychology mystery questions the very roots of human motivation and culture, suggesting that the shadow of mortality shapes our existence in ways we rarely acknowledge, inviting deep relaxation through confronting and perhaps integrating this fundamental existential anxiety as you fall asleep. The theory draws inspiration from the work of cultural anthropologist Ernest Becker, particularly his Pulitzer Prize-winning book The Denial of Death. Becker argued that humans are unique in possessing sophisticated intelligence and self-awareness, which inevitably leads us to recognize our own mortality. This awareness of death, juxtaposed with our innate instinct for self-preservation, creates the potential for overwhelming existential terror. To manage this terror, humans construct and immerse themselves in culturally shared symbolic systems, cultural worldviews, that provide a sense of meaning, order, permanence, and value, effectively buffering the anxiety associated with death. Terror management theory builds upon this foundation, proposing two primary psychological buffers against death anxiety. The first is cultural worldview defense. Our cultural worldview, encompassing religious beliefs, national identity, political ideologies, social norms, and values, provides a sense of symbolic immortality. By adhering to the standards and values of our culture, we feel part of something larger and more enduring than our individual, mortal selves. Our culture offers pathways to literal immortality, e.g., belief in an afterlife, or symbolic immortality, e.g., leaving a legacy through achievements, children, or contributions to the group. When our cultural worldview is threatened, e.g., by encountering people with different beliefs or by criticisms of our group, it implicitly reminds us of our vulnerability and mortality, triggering anxiety. TMT predicts, and experiments confirm, that when people are subtly reminded of their own death, a technique called mortality salience, they tend to react by more strongly defending their cultural worldview, showing increased patriotism, harsher judgments of those who violate cultural norms, greater prejudice against outgroups, and stronger adherence to religious or political beliefs. Defending the worldview helps manage the reactivated death anxiety. The second buffer is self-esteem. Within our cultural worldview, certain standards of value are established. By believing we are meeting these standards, by feeling like a valuable contributor to our meaning system, we achieve self-esteem. This self-esteem serves as a crucial anxiety buffer, giving us a sense of personal significance and worth within the larger, meaning-providing cultural context. It makes us feel less like mere mortal animals destined for oblivion and more like valuable individuals playing a significant role in a meaningful world. TMT research shows that boosting self-esteem can reduce anxiety responses to mortality salience, and conversely, reminders of death often increase efforts to enhance self-esteem, e.g., striving for success, showing off status symbols, seeking validation. Our pursuit of self-worth, from this perspective, is deeply intertwined with the unconscious management of death terror. The implications of terror management theory are vast and sometimes disturbing. It suggests that many seemingly unrelated human behaviors, from brand loyalty and conspicuous consumption, as ways to bolster self-esteem, to political polarization and intergroup conflict, as ways to defend threatened worldviews, might be partially rooted in this fundamental, often unconscious, fear of death. Prejudice and aggression towards outgroups might be amplified because those groups represent alternative, challenging worldviews that implicitly threaten the validity of our own anxiety-buffering beliefs. Heroism and self-sacrifice for one's group or nation can be seen as attempts to achieve symbolic immortality by upholding the values of the enduring culture. Even romantic love might gain some of its intensity from the feeling of merging with another, transcending individual finitude. This mindfuck perspective questions the purity of our motivations, suggesting that the shadow of mortality subtly influences even our most cherished values and aspirations. Is terror management theory the sole explanation for these complex human behaviors? Certainly not. Other factors like social identity, competition for resources, innate drives, and learned behaviors clearly play enormous roles. TMT does not claim to explain everything, but it offers a compelling and experimentally supported framework for understanding one powerful, often overlooked, motivational undercurrent shaping human existence. The mystery lies in the extent and subtlety of this unconscious influence. How much of our daily striving, our cultural allegiances, our defenses and anxieties, truly stems from this repressed existential dread? Can we become more aware of this influence and perhaps manage it more consciously? Recognizing the potential influence of TMT can foster greater self-understanding and potentially greater tolerance. If we understand that worldview defense and self-esteem striving can be amplified by underlying death anxiety in ourselves and others, we might approach disagreements and conflicts with more nuance. We might recognize when patriotism veers into xenophobia, or when the pursuit of self-worth becomes frantic or destructive, potentially fueled by deeper existential fears. It encourages introspection. What cultural narratives provide me with a sense of meaning and permanence? How do I react when those narratives are challenged? Am I pursuing self-esteem in ways that are healthy and authentic, or as a defense mechanism? As you continue to fall asleep, allow your awareness to gently touch upon the awareness of your own mortality. Acknowledge the profound fact of finitude. Notice any subtle anxieties or defenses that arise. Terror management theory suggests much of our cultural and personal striving might be an intricate dance with this awareness. Let this thought settle without fear. Perhaps acknowledging the unconscious fear of death can paradoxically reduce its power. By bringing the shadow into awareness, we can choose how to respond, finding meaning not just in symbolic defenses, but in authentic living, connection, and acceptance of the present moment. Find deep relaxation in embracing the fullness of existence, both its preciousness and its impermanence, resting peacefully, acknowledging the deep currents beneath the surface of the mind. The intractability of suffering. We have touched upon the problem of evil, questioning how widespread suffering can coexist with a benevolent God. Let us now delve deeper, setting aside theological frames for a moment, and confront the raw, existential mystery of suffering itself. Why does existence inevitably involve pain, loss, grief, anxiety, and distress? Why isn't life simply neutral, or perhaps even consistently pleasant? From an evolutionary perspective, pain and negative emotions clearly serve adaptive functions, signaling danger, motivating avoidance, facilitating learning. But the sheer intensity, the profound subjective quality of suffering, the agony of physical pain, the crushing weight of grief, the gnawing of existential dread, often seems vastly disproportionate to any simple functional explanation. Why must things hurt so much? Why is the subjective experience of negativity often so overwhelming and persistent? The intractability of suffering, its resistance to easy explanation or complete elimination despite our best efforts, remains a profound psychology mystery and philosophical enigma, questioning the very nature of sentience and the conditions of our being, inviting deep relaxation through the difficult, yet potentially liberating contemplation of pain's place in the tapestry of life. From a biological standpoint, pain is a vital warning system. Physical pain alerts us to tissue damage, prompting us to withdraw from harm and protect injuries while they heal. Without the capacity for pain, we would quickly succumb to injuries and infections. Similarly, negative emotions like fear trigger fight or flight responses crucial for survival, while disgust helps us avoid contaminants. Sadness might signal a need for social support or prompt withdrawal for recovery after loss. Anxiety might motivate preparation for future challenges. In this sense, suffering, or at least the capacity for it, seems biologically necessary, sculpted by natural selection. However, this functional explanation often feels incomplete when confronted with the sheer phenomenology of suffering. It explains that pain signals damage, but not why that signal must feel so agonizingly unpleasant. It explains that fear motivates escape, but not why it must feel like paralyzing terror. There's a gap between the function of negative states and their subjective quality, the raw, visceral hurt. This links back once again to the hard problem of consciousness. Why does any neural state feel like anything, and specifically, why do certain states feel so intensely negative? Could evolution have achieved the same functional outcomes, danger signaling, behavioral motivation, through less subjectively painful mechanisms? Or is the intensity of the negative qualia itself an essential part of its functional efficacy, ensuring the signal cannot be ignored? This remains a deep mystery. Furthermore, much human suffering seems to extend far beyond immediate biological utility. Existential angst, grief over irretrievable loss, feelings of meaninglessness, the pain of social rejection, the burden of psychological trauma. These forms of suffering often seem chronic, pervasive, and resistant to simple functional explanation. While they might have roots in evolved social needs or cognitive processes, their intensity and persistence often appear maladaptive, hindering rather than helping our well-being and functioning. Why does the psyche seem capable of generating such profound and lasting inner torment, seemingly untethered from immediate survival needs? Philosophical and spiritual traditions have grappled with the intractability of suffering for millennia. Buddhism places suffering, dukkha, at the very center of its analysis of the human condition, identifying its root cause in attachment, craving, and ignorance of the true nature of reality, impermanence, no self. Liberation comes not from eliminating external causes of pain, which is impossible, but from transforming our internal relationship to suffering through wisdom and detachment. Stoicism similarly emphasizes acceptance of what we cannot control, external events including pain and loss, and focusing on cultivating inner virtue and equanimity as the path to resilience and tranquility amidst inevitable hardship. These traditions don't necessarily explain why suffering must exist in the first place, but offer profound strategies for navigating its inevitability. From a psychological perspective, our cognitive architecture itself seems prone to generating suffering. Cognitive biases like the negativity bias, giving more weight to negative experiences, or rumination, repetitively dwelling on negative thoughts and feelings, can amplify and prolong suffering. Our capacity for abstract thought, future planning, and self-reflection, while powerful tools, also allows us to anticipate future threats, anxiety, dwell on past regrets, guilt, and contemplate our own mortality, existential dread, in ways other animals perhaps cannot. The very sophistication of our minds might make us uniquely vulnerable to certain kinds of psychological pain. The question remains, is intense suffering an unavoidable byproduct of complex consciousness and biological life operating in an indifferent universe? Is it a necessary component for growth, contrast, or appreciation of joy? Or does its sheer excessiveness point towards a fundamental flaw, a deep paradox, or an unanswerable mystery at the heart of existence? Why the tears, the heartbreak, the despair, the physical agony that seems to serve no purpose beyond its own agonizing presence? Contemplating the intractability of suffering is not about reveling in negativity, but about acknowledging a fundamental, often painful aspect of the human condition with honesty and compassion. It challenges simplistic notions of happiness as the sole goal of life and invites a deeper exploration of resilience, meaning, and acceptance. Recognizing that suffering is a universal, though unevenly distributed, part of existence can foster empathy for others and self-compassion for our own struggles. It can motivate efforts to alleviate unnecessary suffering where possible, while also cultivating the inner resources to bear the suffering that cannot be avoided. As you continue to fall asleep, allow your awareness to gently acknowledge the reality of suffering in the world, perhaps even within your own experience. Recognize its sharp edges, its heavy weight. Acknowledge the profound mystery of why it must hurt, why negative experiences carry such potent subjective force. Let go of the need for a complete explanation or justification. Instead, cultivate a quiet sense of compassion, for yourself, for others, for all sentient beings navigating the challenges of existence. Find deep relaxation not in denying pain, but in accepting the full spectrum of human experience, the shadows alongside the light, trusting in your capacity for resilience and finding peace even amidst the awareness of life's inherent difficulties. The dark universe mystery. Let us now expand our focus outwards again to the grandest scale imaginable, the entire universe. We look up at the night sky and see stars, galaxies, nebulae, a breathtaking display of light and matter. We study planets, moons, asteroids. Through powerful telescopes and sophisticated physics, we have mapped the cosmos and its evolution with remarkable precision. Yet, underlying this visible tapestry lies perhaps the most profound and humbling mystery in modern cosmology, the dark universe. Astronomical observations and cosmological models consistently indicate that all the ordinary matter we can see and interact with, everything made of atoms, from galaxies and stars down to ourselves, constitutes only about 5% of the total mass and energy content of the universe. The remaining 95% appears to be composed of two enigmatic, invisible substances: dark matter, making up roughly 27%, and dark energy, making up roughly 68%. We know they must be there because of their gravitational effects on the visible universe, but we don't know what they are. What is this invisible scaffolding that dominates the cosmos? What is this strange energy driving the universe's accelerated expansion? The dark universe mystery fundamentally questions our understanding of matter, energy, gravity, and the ultimate fate of existence itself. It's a cosmic mind-bothering, revealing that almost everything out there is completely unknown to us, inviting contemplation of the vast unseen as you fall asleep. Let's first consider dark matter. Its existence was first inferred decades ago from observations of galaxies and galaxy clusters. Astronomers noticed that galaxies were rotating much faster than they should based on the amount of visible matter, stars, gas, dust, they contained. To prevent these rapidly spinning galaxies from flying apart, there had to be significantly more mass present than could be seen, providing the necessary gravitational glue. This unseen mass was dubbed dark matter. Similar evidence comes from the way galaxy clusters bend light from objects behind them, gravitational lensing. The amount of bending indicates far more mass than is visible. We also see its imprint on the large-scale structure of the universe and the cosmic microwave background radiation. Dark matter seems to form vast, invisible halos around galaxies and clusters, providing the gravitational scaffolding upon which visible structures form. But what is it? It doesn't interact with light, hence dark, nor does it seem to interact significantly with ordinary matter except through gravity. Leading candidates include hypothetical elementary particles, like WIMPs, weakly interacting massive particles, or axions, predicted by extensions to the standard model of particle physics, but despite extensive experimental searches, no definitive detection has yet been made. Could it be primordial black holes? Or does it require modifications to our theory of gravity itself? The nature of dark matter remains one of the biggest unsolved problems in physics. Even more mysterious is dark energy. In the late 1990s, astronomers studying distant supernovae made a startling discovery. The expansion of the universe is not slowing down due to gravity as expected, but is actually accelerating. Something is actively pushing spacetime apart, counteracting gravity on cosmic scales. This unknown something was named dark energy. It appears to be smoothly distributed throughout space and possesses a strange property: negative pressure, which creates a repulsive gravitational effect. According to our best cosmological models, like the lambda CDM model, dark energy constitutes the largest component of the universe's energy density, driving its accelerating expansion. But its fundamental nature is a complete enigma. Is it the cosmological constant, an intrinsic energy density of empty space itself, as first proposed and later retracted by Einstein? If so, why does it have the specific, incredibly small but non-zero value we observe? Theoretical calculations suggest the vacuum energy should be vastly larger. Is it a new type of dynamic energy field, sometimes called quintessence, that changes over time? Or does the accelerating expansion indicate that Einstein's theory of general relativity needs modification on cosmic scales? Understanding dark energy is crucial not only for cosmology but for fundamental physics, as it likely holds keys to the nature of space, time, and vacuum energy. Together, dark matter and dark energy constitute the dark universe, the invisible 95% that dominates cosmic evolution and structure, yet whose fundamental nature remains completely unknown to us. This is a profound state of affairs, a cosmic mind-boggling of the highest order. It means our entire scientific understanding, built upon observing the 5% of ordinary matter, might be missing the vast majority of what constitutes reality. It questions the completeness of our physical theories and highlights the vastness of our ignorance about the fundamental constituents and forces shaping existence. Are the laws of physics as we know them sufficient, or do we need entirely new frameworks to accommodate these dark components? The dark universe mystery is not just about missing ingredients, it's about the fundamental character of the cosmos. Does the existence of dark matter point to new particles beyond the standard model? Does dark energy imply a strange energy inherent in empty space itself, or a modification of gravity? The answers will reshape our understanding of particle physics, cosmology, and the ultimate fate of the universe, whether it expands forever, collapses, or something else. The search for dark matter and dark energy involves cutting-edge experiments deep underground, vast astronomical surveys, and complex theoretical modeling, a global scientific effort driven by one of the deepest questions we can ask about the world beyond our planet. As you continue to fall asleep, let your mind expand outwards into the cosmic darkness. Picture the galaxies spinning faster than they should, held together by invisible halos of dark matter. Imagine the vast emptiness of space pushing everything apart, driven by the mysterious force of dark energy. Acknowledge the profound mystery that 95% of the universe remains unknown, unseen, unexplained. Let this cosmic ignorance foster not anxiety, but a sense of profound wonder and humility. Find deep relaxation in accepting the vastness of the unknown, recognizing that the visible world is just a small part of a much larger, darker, and more enigmatic reality, resting peacefully within the immense, invisible architecture of the cosmos. The metaethical void. We return once more to the realm of morality, but this time we probe even deeper, beyond specific ethical theories, into the metaethical landscape, the study of the nature, origin, and justification of moral judgments themselves. We previously asked if objective morality, moral truths independent of opinion, is possible without God. Let us now confront the potentially more unsettling possibility raised by certain philosophical viewpoints. What if no grounding, divine or secular, can ultimately provide objective, universally binding authority for moral claims? What if, at the very foundation, there is a kind of metaethical void? This perspective, encompassing views like moral skepticism, error theory, and certain forms of non-cognitivism, suggests that our moral language, while deeply meaningful to us, might not actually refer to objective facts or properties in the world. Perhaps moral judgments are ultimately expressions of emotion, prescriptions for behavior, useful social fictions, or systematically mistaken attempts to describe a reality that simply contains no inherent oughts. This mind-bending paradox questions not just specific moral beliefs, but the very status of morality itself, suggesting our deepest ethical convictions might lack any ultimate anchor in objective reality. It's one of the deepest questions, forcing us to confront the potential groundlessness of value as you fall asleep. Let's gently unpack some of the perspectives that lead towards this void. Moral skepticism argues that we lack sufficient justification for knowing any objective moral truths, even if such truths exist. Given the persistent disagreement among rational people about fundamental ethical principles, as seen in our earlier discussion of justice, and the difficulty of finding conclusive evidence for moral claims, skeptics argue we should suspend judgment about objective morality. We simply can't know what is truly right or wrong in an objective sense. Moral error theory, most famously associated with philosopher J.L. Mackie, goes a step further. It agrees that our ordinary moral language intends to refer to objective moral facts and properties. We talk as if cruelty is wrong, is an objective truth. However, error theory argues that such objective moral properties simply do not exist in the universe. They are metaphysically queer, or strange, unlike any other property science reveals. Therefore, all our objective moral claims, while meaningful, are systematically false. Morality, in this view, is a widespread, perhaps useful, but ultimately erroneous way of thinking about the world. We are trying to describe objective oughts in a universe composed only of is. Non-cognitivism, including emotivism and prescriptivism, offers a different route to a similar conclusion. It suggests that moral statements do not even attempt to describe objective facts or express propositions that can be true or false. Instead, moral language primarily serves other functions. Emotivism, like that of A.J. Ayer or C.L. Stevenson, argues that moral statements primarily express the speaker's emotions or attitudes and attempt to evoke similar feelings in others. Saying stealing is wrong is akin to saying stealing? Boo. Or, I disapprove of stealing, you should too. Prescriptivism, like that of R.M. Hare, suggests moral statements function like universalizable commands or imperatives. Stealing is wrong means something like, do not steal, and assent to the principle that nobody should steal in relevantly similar situations. In these non-cognitivist views, morality isn't about objective truth or falsehood, but about expressing feelings, attitudes, or issuing commands. There is no objective moral reality for our statements to correspond to, or fail to correspond to. These various metaethical positions, while differing in their specifics, converge on the unsettling possibility that our deeply felt moral convictions lack an ultimate, objective foundation in the fabric of reality. If there are no objective moral facts, then why should anyone adhere to a particular moral code if it doesn't suit their interests? Doesn't this lead inevitably to nihilism or a corrosive relativism where anything goes? This is the fear that the metaethical void evokes. It questions the authority and binding force of morality itself. However, even if objective moral realism is false, it doesn't necessarily mean morality collapses entirely. Many non-realist philosophers argue that morality can still be meaningful and functional, grounded perhaps in shared human psychology, evolutionary pressures for cooperation, social contracts, rational consistency, even without objective truth, or pragmatic concerns for well-being. Morality might be a human construction, a vital tool for navigating social life, promoting cooperation and regulating behavior, even if it lacks a transcendent or objective anchor. Its value lies in its utility and its role in facilitating human flourishing, not in its correspondence to non-existent moral facts. We might uphold moral principles not because they are objectively true, but because doing so leads to better lives and societies, based on shared values and practical reason. The feeling that some things are genuinely, objectively wrong, the sense of binding obligation, with the philosophical difficulty of locating a firm, universally accepted foundation for that objectivity outside of human minds or divine decree. We feel like morality is objective, yet justifying that feeling philosophically proves immensely challenging, leading some to conclude the feeling itself might be part of a useful illusion or a misinterpretation of emotion and social convention. This mystery forces us to reflect deeply on the source and status of our own values. Are they commands from a higher power? Reflections of objective truths? Products of reason? Expressions of emotion? Social agreements? Evolutionary adaptations? Or some complex combination? Understanding the metaethical landscape doesn't provide easy answers, but it clarifies the nature of the questions and the range of possible stances. It challenges us to think more critically about why we hold the moral beliefs we do and how we justify them. As you continue to fall asleep, allow your mind to gently hold the question of morality's foundation. Is there solid ground beneath our concepts of right and wrong, or do they float upon the currents of human psychology, culture, and convention? Contemplate the possibility of a metaethical void, a universe silent on the question of ultimate value. Does this thought diminish the importance of kindness, justice, compassion? Or does it perhaps place an even greater responsibility upon us to create and uphold these values in a world that doesn't guarantee them? Find deep relaxation not in finding an absolute anchor for morality, but in appreciating the profound human commitment to ethical striving itself, recognizing the ongoing vital conversation about how we ought to live, even amidst the deepest philosophical uncertainties, resting peacefully within the complex, perhaps groundless, yet essential realm of moral existence. Okay, let us proceed with the final 5 segments, delving into the identity of evolving ideas, the meaning of meaning itself, the mystery of emergence, the enigmatic power of belief over biology, and the ultimate limits of formal proof. Allow these concluding explorations to guide you gently into the profound quietude of deep relaxation and sleep. Conceptual ship of Theseus. We've contemplated the paradox of the ship of Theseus concerning physical objects and personal identity, the puzzle of continuity amidst constant material change. Now, let us elevate this enigmatic paradox to the realm of the abstract, applying it to the very structures of thought that shape civilizations, ideologies, religions, philosophical schools, scientific paradigms, even cultural movements. These vast conceptual ships also sail through time, constantly undergoing change. Core doctrines are reinterpreted, founding texts are translated and understood differently, practices evolve, membership shifts, fundamental assumptions are challenged or replaced by later adherents. If every single belief, practice, or defining feature of an ideology or religion is gradually modified or replaced over centuries, can we still meaningfully call it the same entity? At what point does gradual evolution become radical transformation, resulting in something entirely new, merely carrying the old name? This conceptual ship of Theseus questions the identity and continuity of our most cherished systems of meaning and belief, revealing the elusive nature of abstract identity and forcing us to ask what truly defines the persistence of an idea through history. It's a profound mystery about the existence and endurance of thought itself. Consider a major world religion. Compare its practices, interpretations of scripture, social structures, and core theological emphases today with those from 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. The differences can be staggering. Early tenets might be downplayed or reinterpreted symbolically, new doctrines might emerge, rituals transform, the relationship with secular power shifts dramatically. The planks of belief and practice are constantly being weathered, repaired, and replaced. Is contemporary Christianity this same religion as that practiced by the apostles? Is modern Buddhism the same as the path taught by the historical Buddha? Is contemporary liberalism the same political ideology as classical liberalism? If all the component ideas have shifted, what provides the thread of continuity? Is it a shared name? A historical lineage, however contested? A continuous community of adherents, even if their beliefs change? An unchanging essence, or spirit, that persists beneath the surface transformations? The paradox intensifies because, unlike a physical ship, the parts of an idea system are themselves fluid and subject to interpretation. What counts as a core doctrine versus a peripheral belief? Who gets to decide when a change represents legitimate development versus heretical departure? History is replete with schisms, reformations, and counter-reformations, all essentially arguing about the identity of the conceptual ship. Different factions claim to represent the true continuation of the original vessel, accusing others of having replaced too many essential planks or having built a fundamentally different ship altogether while retaining the old insignia. Think about scientific paradigms as described by Thomas Kuhn. Newtonian physics dominated for centuries, explaining the world with remarkable success. Yet, relativity and quantum mechanics introduced fundamentally different concepts of space, time, gravity, and matter. Was this a replacement of planks on the existing ship of physics, or did it constitute a paradigm shift, so radical that scientists after Einstein and Planck were sailing entirely different conceptual vessels, inhabiting different worlds of understanding? If the fundamental assumptions and conceptual framework change, can we still speak of this same scientific enterprise, or just a historical succession of different ways of understanding reality? This conceptual ship of Theseus forces us to confront the criteria we use for abstract identity. Is identity based on origin, traceable lineage back to a founder or founding text? Is it based on core tenets, but who defines them and can they change? Is it based on function? Does the ideology still serve the same social or psychological purpose? Is it based on self-identification? Do adherents believe they are part of the same continuous tradition? Often the answer seems dependent on perspective and purpose. Historians might trace lineage, sociologists might look at function, theologians or ideologues might focus on doctrinal fidelity or perceived fidelity. This mystery is not merely academic. It has profound implications for understanding social change, cultural transmission, religious authority, and ideological conflict. Claims to authenticity, tradition, or orthodoxy are often implicit arguments about the identity of the conceptual ship, assertions that certain planks are essential and must not be replaced. Conversely, calls for reform, progress, or adaptation often argue that the ship can and must change its planks to remain seaworthy in new waters, while still claiming continuity with the original vessel's purpose or spirit. The paradox reveals that the identity of these large-scale belief systems is often a site of ongoing negotiation and contestation. Unlike a physical ship, where we might theoretically track every plank, the components of an idea system are intangible and their evolution less clear-cut. This makes the conceptual version of the paradox perhaps even more intractable. There may be no single objective answer to whether modern Catholicism is the same religion as first-century Christianity, or whether contemporary physics is the same science as Newton's. The answer depends entirely on the criteria of identity we choose to employ. As you continue to fall asleep, contemplate the vast, evolving ships of ideas that sail through human history, religions, philosophies, nations, cultures. See them not as static monuments but as dynamic entities constantly repairing, rebuilding, adapting. Planks of belief being replaced, interpretations shifting like currents. Yet, the name, the lineage, the sense of continuity often persists. What defines this enduring identity amidst constant change? Let the conceptual ship of Theseus dissolve any notion of fixed, unchanging ideologies or traditions. Find deep relaxation in acknowledging the fluid, dynamic nature of human thought and culture. Appreciate the ongoing dialogue between past and present that shapes these conceptual vessels, resting peacefully within the grand, evolving, and paradoxical stream of history. The meaning of meaning. We have previously pondered the grand question of the meaning of life, exploring various philosophical perspectives on purpose and value in existence. Let us now take a step back, turning the lens of inquiry onto the concept of meaning itself. What does it actually mean for something, a word, a symbol, an action, a life, to be meaningful? What are the criteria for meaningfulness? Is meaning something objective we discover, something subjective we create, something relational arising from context, or perhaps something else entirely? This dive into meta-meaning, the meaning of meaning, reveals layers of complexity and potential paradox, questioning the very tools we use to evaluate significance and purpose. It's a reality-warping paradox, suggesting that our search for meaning might be hampered by a lack of clarity about what meaning itself entails, inviting deep relaxation through contemplating the foundations of significance as you fall asleep. Consider the different ways we use the word meaning. We talk about the meaning of a word, its definition or reference. We talk about the meaning of a symbol, what it represents. We talk about the meaning of an action, its intention or consequence. And we talk about the meaning of a life, its purpose, value, or significance. Are these different types of meaning related? Do they share a common core? Or are we using the same word for fundamentally different concepts? Let's focus on existential meaning, the kind relevant to the meaning of life. What properties make a life or an experience within it feel meaningful? Philosophers and psychologists have proposed various criteria. Purpose is often cited, having goals, projects, or a direction towards which one strives. Value is another, engaging in activities or holding beliefs that are considered intrinsically worthwhile or good. Significance or impact plays a role, feeling that one's life matters, makes a difference, or fits into a larger narrative. Coherence is also mentioned, the sense that one's life makes sense, that its parts fit together into an understandable whole. Connection and belonging are frequently highlighted, feeling part of relationships, communities, or traditions larger than oneself. But even these criteria raise further deep questions. Where do these purposes, values, or narratives come from? If we adopt the nihilistic view that the universe itself offers no inherent meaning, then any purpose or value must be subjective or constructed. But can a purely subjective or constructed meaning provide the deep sense of significance many people seek? If meaning is entirely self-created, does it lack a certain grounding or objective weight? This leads to a potential paradox. We seek objective meaning but might only be able to find subjective meaning, which then feels potentially less satisfying because it lacks that objective validation. Consider the relationship between meaning and happiness. Are they the same thing? While often correlated, they seem distinct. One can experience pleasure or happiness in moments devoid of deeper meaning, and one can find profound meaning in activities involving struggle or suffering, like raising a child, fighting for justice, or creating challenging art. The paradox of hedonism suggested that directly pursuing happiness can be counterproductive. Perhaps directly pursuing meaning faces similar challenges. Does focusing too intensely on finding meaning paradoxically make life feel less meaningful by turning it into an anxious, self-conscious project? What about the scale of meaning? Does meaning require grand achievements, historical impact, or cosmic significance? Or can it be found in small, everyday moments, a shared laugh, appreciating beauty, performing a simple act of kindness? If meaning can be found in the mundane, does that dilute the concept or make it more accessible? If only grand achievements count, does that render most ordinary lives meaningless? Our intuitions here are often conflicted. Furthermore, is meaning something stable, or is it constantly shifting and context-dependent? Can the meaning of an event or even a whole life change retrospectively based on later outcomes or reinterpretations? Does meaning reside in individual moments, or only emerge when looking back at the larger narrative arc? The very definition seems fluid. This leads to the meta-meaning puzzle. What criteria do we use to judge whether a proposed source of meaning, God's plan, self-creation, human connection, pleasure, virtue, is itself a valid source? How do we evaluate the meaningfulness of different meaning systems? If someone finds deep subjective meaning in a belief system that others deem irrational or harmful, how do we adjudicate? Is the feeling of meaning sufficient justification, or are there objective standards for what constitutes a truly meaningful life? Asking what is the meaning of meaning forces us to confront the potential circularity or infinite regress in justifying our frameworks for value and significance, linking back to the Munchausen trilemma. We are trying to use concepts of value and significance to define value and significance itself. This paradox lies in the self-referential nature of the question. We are using meaning-seeking minds to ask about the nature of meaning. We are using language, itself a system of meaning, to interrogate meaning. Can such a system ever achieve a complete, objective, external perspective on itself? Perhaps the search for a single, definitive answer to what is meaning is itself based on a category error, assuming meaning is a single thing to be defined rather than a complex web of relationships, functions, feelings, and interpretations. As you continue to fall asleep, let the question of meaning gently dissolve into its own layers. What does it mean to seek meaning? What does it mean for your life to feel significant? Acknowledge the different layers: purpose, value, coherence, connection. Recognize that the meaning of meaning itself is a profound mystery, perhaps inherently tied to subjective experience and context. Let go of the need for a final, objective definition. Find deep relaxation not in grasping meaning, but in experiencing it, in connection, in purpose, in simple awareness. Allow your own sense of significance to arise naturally from your lived existence, without needing an ultimate philosophical justification, resting peacefully within the quiet, unfolding meaning of this present moment. The Enigma of Emergence. Consider the universe around you and within you. It is built upon layers of complexity. Fundamental particles interact according to physical laws, forming atoms. Atoms combine to form molecules. Molecules assemble into intricate structures like cells. Cells organize into tissues, organs, and complex organisms like ourselves. Societies emerge from the interactions of individuals. At each level of organization, new properties and behaviors seem to arise that were not present, and perhaps not even predictable, from the properties of the lower-level components alone. Water is wet, but individual H2O molecules are not. Life emerges from complex non-living chemistry, but the constituent chemicals themselves are not alive. Consciousness arises from the intricate firing of non-conscious neurons. This phenomenon, where novel and unpredictable properties or behaviors appear in complex systems as a result of the interactions among their components, is known as emergence. But how does this happen? How does sheer complexity conjure novelty? Is emergence a genuine feature of reality, where the whole truly becomes more than the sum of its parts? Or is it merely an illusion born from our inability to fully comprehend the intricate causal chains linking the micro to the macro? The enigma of emergence represents a profound mystery at the heart of science and philosophy, questioning reductionist explanations and hinting at the creative power inherent in complex organization, inviting deep relaxation through contemplating the surprising ways order and novelty arise from simpler beginnings as you fall asleep. Philosophers and scientists often distinguish between weak emergence and strong emergence. Weak emergence refers to properties that are novel and unpredictable at a lower level but are, in principle, fully explainable and derivable from the interactions of the system's components, even if the calculations are incredibly complex. The intricate patterns of a flock of birds or the behavior of traffic jams might be examples. While complex and seemingly holistic, they can theoretically be simulated and understood by modeling the interactions of individual agents according to simple rules. Weak emergence doesn't fundamentally challenge reductionism, the idea that complex phenomena can be fully explained by their simpler components. It just acknowledges the practical difficulty of predicting complex outcomes. Strong emergence, however, proposes something far more radical and mysterious. It suggests that some emergent properties are irreducible to the properties and interactions of their constituent parts. These properties represent genuinely new fundamental features of reality that arise at higher levels of complexity, possessing causal powers that cannot be fully explained by or predicted from the lower levels, even in principle. Consciousness is often cited as the prime candidate for strong emergence. Can the subjective feeling of experience truly be nothing more than complex neural firing? Or does it represent a fundamentally new kind of property emerging from that complexity? Life itself, the transition from non-living chemistry to self-replicating, metabolizing organisms, is another potential example. Are the properties of life fully reducible to physics and chemistry, or does something genuinely novel emerge? If strong emergence is real, it represents a profound paradox, suggesting that reality has layers with fundamentally new kinds of stuff, or properties appearing as complexity increases. challenging the idea that everything can ultimately be explained by the physics of fundamental particles. The mystery lies in understanding the mechanism of emergence, particularly strong emergence if it exists. How do interactions between simple components give rise to genuinely novel, irreducible properties? What are the principles governing this creative leap? Current scientific frameworks, largely built on reductionist methodologies, breaking things down into parts, struggle to fully account for strong emergence. If a property is truly irreducible, how can we study it using methods designed to analyze components? This leads to deep debates about the limits of reductionism and the need for potentially new scientific paradigms that can handle holistic, emergent phenomena. Consider the intricate folding of a protein. Its final three-dimensional shape, which determines its biological function, emerges from the complex interactions between its linear sequence of amino acids and the surrounding environment. While governed by physical laws, predicting the final folded state from the sequence alone remains incredibly challenging, hinting at the complex emergence of function from structure. Consider the coordinated behavior of an ant colony, achieving sophisticated tasks like building nests or foraging efficiently, seemingly without centralized control, collective intelligence emerging from simple individual rules. Consider the emergence of economic markets, social norms, or language itself from the interactions of countless individuals. In all these cases, the behavior of the whole system seems richer and more complex than a simple summation of its parts. The Enigma of Emergence questions our fundamental understanding of causality and ontology, the study of being. Does causality only flow upwards, from the micro-level components to the macro-level system? Or can emergent properties exert downward causation, influencing the behavior of the components from which they arose? If consciousness is strongly emergent, can our conscious intentions genuinely influence the firing of our neurons, or are they merely epiphenomenal byproducts? If life is strongly emergent, does it possess causal powers distinct from its underlying chemistry? These questions challenge the standard bottom-up view of scientific explanation. Critics of strong emergence often argue that it invokes mystery where further reductionist explanation is simply needed. They maintain that all phenomena, however complex, must ultimately be explainable in terms of fundamental physical laws acting on fundamental components, even if those explanations are currently beyond our reach. Apparent emergence, they argue, is simply a reflection of our ignorance of the intricate micro-level details. Invoking strong emergence, they fear, might stifle scientific progress by resorting to unexplained magic arising from complexity. The debate between reductionism and emergence remains active and crucial across many scientific fields, from physics and biology to neuroscience and social science. It forces us to grapple with the relationship between different levels of reality and the limitations of our explanatory frameworks. As you continue to fall asleep, contemplate the nested layers of existence. Particles forming atoms, atoms forming molecules, molecules forming cells, cells forming you. Consider how novel properties seem to arise at each level of complexity. Is this emergence a predictable consequence of underlying laws, or something more mysterious, a genuine creation of novelty? Let the enigma of emergence dissolve simplistic notions of reality. Find deep relaxation in appreciating the universe's capacity for self-organization and creativity, the way intricate wholes arise from simpler parts. Acknowledge the profound mystery of how complexity breeds novelty, resting peacefully within the intricate, layered, and endlessly fascinating structure of reality. The placebo/nocebo enigma. How does sheer belief physically warp your biology? We return now to a phenomenon we touched upon earlier, but let us approach it now explicitly as a profound paradox that questions the very relationship between mind and body, belief and biology. The placebo and nocebo enigma. We know the placebo effect involves real, positive physiological changes resulting from the belief in an inert treatment. Conversely, the nocebo effect involves real, negative physiological changes resulting from the belief in harm or negative expectations. Sugar pills can alleviate pain, warnings about side effects can induce them. This isn't merely psychology influencing perception. It involves measurable changes in brain chemistry, hormone release, immune function, and other biological processes. The deep mystery, the deeply perplexing paradox lies in how. How does a purely mental state, a belief, an expectation, a feeling of hope or fear, translate into tangible, specific alterations in our physical biology? What are the precise mechanisms that allow sheer belief to apparently warp our physiological reality? This enigma challenges the traditional separation of mind and body and reveals the astonishing, still poorly understood, power of our internal states to shape our physical existence, inviting deep relaxation through contemplating the profound connection within. Consider the implications. If taking a sugar pill, believing it's a powerful painkiller, can trigger the release of your brain's own natural opioids, effectively reducing pain signals, what does this say about the reality of pain and the power of expectation? It suggests that the subjective experience of pain is not solely determined by nociceptive signals from the body, but is heavily modulated by top-down cognitive and emotional factors. Belief acts as a potent analgesic. Similarly, if believing a harmless substance will make you nauseous can actually trigger feelings of nausea and associated physiological responses, like changes in stomach activity, it demonstrates that negative expectations can generate genuine physical distress. The mind's anticipation creates the body's reality. The enigma deepens when we consider the specificity and context dependence of these effects. The way a placebo is administered matters. Injections often work better than pills, branded pills better than generic ones, expensive placebos better than cheap ones. The words the doctor uses, their perceived empathy and authority, the color of the pill, all these seemingly superficial factors can significantly modulate the strength of the placebo and nocebo response. This suggests the effect is not a simple on-off switch triggered by belief, but a complex response heavily influenced by symbolism, ritual, social cues, and the meaning attributed to the entire therapeutic encounter. How do these symbolic and contextual factors translate into specific neurobiological changes? How does the belief that a blue pill is a sedative actually induce calming physiological effects, while the belief that a red pill is a stimulant induces arousal? The nocebo effect presents perhaps even starker questions. While the placebo effect generally involves activating the body's innate healing or reward pathways, the nocebo effect seems capable of generating negative symptoms seemingly out of nothing but negative expectation. How does the fear of a side effect like headache actually trigger the physiological cascade leading to a headache? How can cultural beliefs about curses or hexes, in extreme cases, potentially lead to demonstrable physical decline through overwhelming psychophysiological stress triggered by belief? This power of negative belief to manifest physically questions our sense of bodily autonomy and highlights our vulnerability to suggestion and fear. While neuroscience has identified some pathways involved, opioid release, dopamine modulation, activation of pain control centers, stress hormone responses, altered immune function, a complete picture explaining the precise translation from subjective belief/expectation to specific physiological outcome is still lacking. How does the content of the belief, e.g., this pill will stop pain versus this pill will cause nausea, direct the specific biological response? How does the brain know which physiological levers to pull based solely on a mental state? This intricate mind-body signaling remains a significant psychology mystery. This paradox fundamentally questions the Cartesian divide between mind and matter. It suggests that thoughts and beliefs are not ephemeral, non-physical events separate from the body, but are deeply embodied processes capable of directly influencing physiological function in highly specific ways. Our mental states are not just reflections of our biology, they are active participants in shaping it. This has profound implications for healthcare, suggesting that optimizing the psychological context of treatment, fostering hope, managing expectations, building trust, is not merely bedside manner, but potentially a powerful therapeutic intervention in itself. It also implies that our everyday beliefs, attitudes, and emotional states might be constantly, subtly influencing our physical health in ways we are only beginning to understand. The placebo/nocebo enigma is a reality-warping paradox because it reveals the astonishing power residing within our own minds to alter our physical reality, both for better and for worse, through mechanisms that defy simple explanation. It suggests that the boundary between mental and physical is far more porous than we commonly assume. It challenges us to take our own beliefs and expectations seriously, recognizing their tangible impact on our well-being. As you continue to fall asleep, bring a gentle awareness to the connection between your mind and body. Feel the subtle interplay, the way a calming thought can soften muscles, the way anxiety can quicken the pulse. Contemplate the enigma of the placebo and nocebo effects, the power of sheer belief to heal or harm. Recognize this not as magic, but as a profound testament to the intricate, mysterious unity of your being. Let go of rigid separations between thought and flesh. Find deep relaxation in appreciating the subtle power you hold within your own expectations and attitudes, trusting in the body's wisdom while acknowledging the mind's profound influence, resting peacefully within the deeply interconnected reality of your own existence. Gödel's incompleteness. Are there mathematical truths we can never prove? We conclude our deep dive into the paradoxes that question existence by returning to the realm of pure logic and mathematics, often considered the last bastion of absolute certainty. Here, within the very foundations of formal reasoning, we encounter a discovery that shattered the dream of perfect, complete knowledge: Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Proven by the logician Kurt Gödel in 1931, these theorems demonstrate fundamental limitations inherent in any sufficiently powerful formal system, like arithmetic or systems intended to encompass all of mathematics. In essence, Gödel showed that within any such consistent system, there will always be statements that are true according to the system's own framework, but which cannot be proven using the system's own axioms and rules of inference. Furthermore, the second theorem showed that such a system cannot prove its own consistency from within itself. This revelation was a profound paradox for mathematics and philosophy, demonstrating that even in the purest realm of logic, there are inherent boundaries to proof and certainty. It questions the very possibility of complete, self-contained knowledge systems and suggests that truth might forever outrun proof. Can there be truths we can apprehend but never formally demonstrate? Let this ultimate limit of reason gently guide you towards sleep. Before Gödel, many mathematicians, led by figures like David Hilbert, held a powerful dream: to create a complete and consistent axiomatic system for all of mathematics. They hoped to establish a finite set of axioms, fundamental assumptions, and logical rules from which all mathematical truths could be rigorously proven, and which could be shown to be free from internal contradictions. This Hilbert program aimed to place mathematics on an unshakable foundation of logical certainty. Gödel's incompleteness theorems delivered a stunning blow to this aspiration. Let's try to grasp the core idea intuitively, without delving into the complex formal logic. Gödel cleverly constructed a mathematical statement within formal arithmetic that essentially says about itself: this statement is unprovable within this formal system. Let's call this statement G. Now consider statement G. If G were provable within the system, then what it asserts, its unprovability, would be false. This would mean the system proves a false statement, making the system inconsistent. On the other hand, if G is unprovable within the system, then what it asserts is actually true. So, we have a statement G that is true within the context of the system's meaning, but unprovable using the system's own rules and axioms, assuming the system is consistent. This demonstrates the first incompleteness theorem. Any consistent formal system powerful enough to express basic arithmetic will inevitably contain true statements that it cannot prove. The second incompleteness theorem builds upon this, showing that one such unprovable statement within a consistent system is the statement asserting the system's own consistency. In other words, a sufficiently powerful and consistent formal system cannot prove its own consistency using only its own resources. To prove its consistency, one would need to step outside the system and use stronger assumptions or methods. This placed a fundamental limit on the Hilbert program's goal of providing a self-contained, absolute foundation for mathematical certainty. The implications of Gödel's incompleteness are profound and extend far beyond pure mathematics, touching upon the limits of human knowledge, computation, and artificial intelligence. It suggests that no formal system, no matter how complex or sophisticated, can ever capture all mathematical truths. There will always be truths that lie beyond its deductive reach. This implies that mathematical reality, if it exists independently, as Platonists believe, might be infinitely richer than any single formal system we can construct. It hints that human mathematical intuition or insight might involve processes that transcend purely formal algorithmic proof procedures. Could the human mind grasp truths that no formal system, and thus perhaps no conventional computer, could ever prove? This remains a deep philosophical debate. It also questions the very nature of truth and proof. Gödel separated these concepts. A statement can be true within a system's intended meaning even if it's unprovable within that system's formal rules. This challenges the idea, common in some philosophical traditions like logical positivism, that meaning and truth are reducible solely to formal provability or empirical verification. It suggests there might be meaningful truths accessible through other means, perhaps intuition or direct apprehension, that escape formal nets. This paradox, though technically theorems, their implications feel paradoxical against prior assumptions, is a ultimate foundation-shaking paradoxes because it reveals limitations at the heart of our most rigorous form of reasoning. It shows that the quest for complete, self-contained certainty, even in mathematics, is unattainable. There will always be horizons beyond our current proofs, truths residing just outside the reach of our formal systems. It implies a fundamental openness or incompleteness in the structure of logical and mathematical existence. Does this undermine mathematics or logic? Not necessarily. Mathematics remains an incredibly powerful and consistent tool within its defined frameworks. Gödel's theorems don't imply contradictions within standard mathematics. They reveal limitations about what any single formal system can achieve. It introduces a profound sense of humility regarding the scope of formal proof and the dream of absolute certainty. It suggests that the landscape of mathematical truth is vast, perhaps infinite, and our formal systems, while powerful explorers, may never fully map the entire territory. As you surrender completely now to deep relaxation, let the implications of Gödel's incompleteness settle into the quiet background of your mind. The idea of truths beyond proof, of limits inherent in even the purest logic. Recognize the vastness of the mathematical and logical universe, extending beyond what any single system can capture. Let go of the need for absolute certainty for complete formal understanding. Find peace in acknowledging the profound mystery that lies even at the foundations of reason. Appreciate the power of human thought to reach towards these limits, even as it recognizes them. Resting calmly, deeply within the infinite, incomplete, yet beautifully ordered tapestry of logical possibility, allowing the paradoxes of existence to dissolve into the quiet mystery of sleep.